My mother always claimed my name meant flower of the sky, yet she looked at me like a stain on her Jimmy Choos. Tonight, before 500 guests. She announced I was a financial burden and cut me off. As the room applauded, I stood silent. They didn't know my phone had just buzzed with a Swiss bank notification. My balance had officially hit $57 million. Their show was over, but my empire was just beginning. My name is Leilani Starling, standing in the shadows of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, holding a silver tray heavy with crystal flutes of champagne. I felt less like a person and more like a prop in a very expensive, very cruel stage play. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and the distinct, metallic scent of old money. This was the Heart of Gold Gala, the premier social event of the Chicago winter season, and the woman at the center of the room, radiating benevolence in a gold-sequined gown, was my mother, Pamela. She looked radiant. She looked generous. She looked like a saint to everyone in this room. She was the philanthropist who wept over photos of starving children and signed checks with a flourish. To me, she was the woman who had forced me into this stiff black uniform and ordered me to work the floor because, according to her, I owed her for the distinct privilege of existing for 29 years. "Do not speak to me," she had hissed in the kitchen earlier, checking her lipstick in the reflection of a serving platter. "Do not look at me, and for the love of God, Leilani, do not tell a single soul who you are. If anyone asks, you are just help, and try to be competent help for once." So I wove through the crowd, dodging elbows clad in Italian silk and avoiding the gaze of people I had gone to private school with a decade ago. My feet throbbed in cheap black shoes. My degree in data analytics was currently useless, buried under the crushing weight of the narrative my family had spun Leilani the failure, Leilani the burden, Leilani who needed to learn the value of $1. I was refilling a glass for a woman whose facelift was so tight she looked perpetually surprised when I saw him. Jackson. My half-brother was leaning against a pillar near the VIP section, holding a glass of red wine and laughing loudly at something a silver-haired investor was saying. Jackson was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my entire year of tuition had, and he wore it with the sloppy arrogance of a man who has never faced a consequence in his life. I tried to steer clear, aiming for the far side of the room, but he saw me. His eyes lit up with a malicious kind of delight. He excused himself from the investor, Mr. Henderson, a man whose venture capital firm Jackson had been trying to woo for months, and stepped directly into my path. "Service," Jackson snapped, snapping his fingers in my face. "Over here. Mr. Henderson is empty." I kept my head down, gripping the tray until my knuckles turned white. "Deeply sorry, sir," I muttered, trying to affect a generic service voice. "I only have champagne." "Then get wine," Jackson said, loud enough for heads to turn. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, his breath sour with expensive scotch. Then, with emotion so fluid it almost looked accidental, he jutted his elbow out just as I tried to sidestep him. The tray tipped. I lunged to catch it, but gravity was faster. 3 flutes of champagne slid off the edge and crashed onto the marble floor, shattering into 1,000 glittering diamonds. But that was not the worst part. In the chaos, Jackson jerked his hand forward, splashing the entirety of his red wine glass all over Mr. Henderson's pristine white dress shirt. The ballroom went silent. The orchestra seemed to falter for a beat. "You clumsy idiot," Jackson roared, pointing a finger at me before I could even straighten up. "Look what you did. Are you blind? You just ruined Mr. Henderson's suit." I started, my voice trembling. "Don't talk back to me," he shouted, playing the outraged guest to perfection. "This is unbelievable. Is this the standard of service here?" "Mr." Henderson looked down at his soaked shirt, his face twisting in disgust. He wasn't looking at Jackson. He was looking at me. "Unacceptable," he muttered. Before I could defend myself, the floor manager was there, gripping my upper arm with bruising force. He was a small, nervous man who lived in terror of Pamela. "I am so sorry, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Starling, he stammered, sweating. She is new, incompetent. I will handle this immediately. Get her out of my face, Jackson sneered. And as I was dragged backward, I saw him wink, a quick, sharp wink just for me. I was shoved into a corner near the service entrance and handed a rag. Clean it up, the manager hissed. Now, on your knees. I dropped to my knees on the cold marble, my hands shaking as I picked up shards of glass. My face burned. I could feel the eyes of 500 people boring into my back, and then a bright light blinded me. I looked up to see Margot. My younger sister stood over me, her phone held high, the ring light case casting a halo around her perfect, professionally contoured face. She was live streaming. Oh my God. You guys, she cooed into the microphone, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Look at this poor girl. It is so sad. We try to give people chances. You know, my mom is literally a saint for hiring her. But some people just can't be helped. She tilted the phone down so her followers could get a good look at me scrubbing wine stains off the floor. Sending prayers for her work ethic. Heart emoji. She didn't speak to me. To her. I wasn't a sister. I was content. I was a prop for her narrative of the benevolent, long-suffering family dealing with the black sheep. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a tear. I finished cleaning the spot, stood up, and tried to retreat to the kitchen, but the humiliation was not over. It was only the opening act. A microphone screeched feedback from the stage. The lights dimmed, and a single spotlight hit the podium. My mother stood there, composing herself. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes shimmering with unshed, practiced tears. Thank you all for being here, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Tonight is about giving. It is about helping those who cannot help themselves. She paused for effect. But sometimes, helping means making hard choices. Sometimes, love means letting go. I froze near the kitchen doors. A cold pit opened in my stomach. She was looking right at me. I have a confession to make, Pamela said, her voice gaining strength. Many of you saw the unfortunate incident on the floor just now. You saw a clumsy waitress, but I see a tragedy. That waitress is my daughter, Leilani. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Whispers broke out like wildfire. I know, Pamela continued, brave and tragic. I have tried everything. I have given her money. I have given her education. I have given her a home in my own basement when she failed to launch her career. I even gave her a job tonight, hoping to instill some sense of responsibility. But you saw what happened. Entitlement, laziness, disrespect. She pointed a manicured finger at me across the room. The spotlight swung, blinding me, pinning me against the wall like an insect on a board. Leilani, she said, her voice booming through the speakers. I love you, but I cannot enable you anymore. You are nearly 30 years old. You are a parasite eating away at the good work this family tries to do. So, in front of God and all these witnesses, I am setting you free. The room was deadly silent. You are no longer welcome in my home, Pamela declared. Pack your things. Actually, do not bother. I will have them sent to a shelter. You need to hit rock bottom to learn how to stand up. Get out, Leilani. Get out, and do not come back until you are a worthy human being. For a second, nobody moved. Then, a single person started clapping. Then another. Soon. The entire ballroom was erupting in applause. They were cheering for her. They were cheering for the brave mother who had finally cut off the dead weight. They looked at me with disgust, with pity, with righteous judgment. I did not scream. I did not beg. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me, freezing the hot shame in my veins. I untied my apron, let it drop to the floor, and turned around. Security was waiting. 2 large men in black suits grabbed me by the arms, not gently. They marched me through the service corridor, past the kitchen staff who refused to meet my eyes, and out the back delivery exit. The metal door slammed shut behind me, with a finality that echoed in my bones. The silence of the alley was shocking after the noise of the ballroom, and then the cold hit me. It was February in Chicago. The wind coming off the lake was a physical assault, a knife made of ice slicing through the thin cotton of my server's uniform. I had no coat. My coat was in the employee locker room, locked inside. I shivered violently, hugging my arms around my chest. I reached into my pocket for my phone and my keys. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the phone. But the keys were gone. I checked the other pocket. Empty. I remembered then. Before the gala. I had left my purse in the cloakroom. Pamela had insisted. You do not need personal items on the floor. My keys to the basement apartment, my wallet, my ID, everything was in there. I had nothing but the phone I had slipped into my pocket against the rules. I was locked out. I was homeless. I was freezing to death in an alleyway behind the Ritz-Carlton while my mother drank champagne and toasted to her own bravery. I walked. I had to keep moving or I would freeze. I stumbled out of the alley and onto the sidewalk. The city was beautiful and cruel, draped in snow that glittered under the streetlights. People walked past me, bundled in furs and wool, looking away from the shivering woman in the waitress uniform. I walked for blocks, my feet numb in the cheap shoes. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from that building, from that applause. My phone buzzed against my hip. I ignored it. Probably Margot tagging me in a post. Probably a text from Jackson laughing at me. It buzzed again and again, a long, sustained vibration that felt urgent. I ducked into the vestibule of a closed bank to escape the wind for a moment. My fingers were stiff and blue as I pulled the phone out. The screen was cracked in the corner from where Jackson had knocked it out of my hand a week ago. There were no texts from family, no notifications from Instagram, just a single email notification sitting on the lock screen. Sender unknown. Subject urgent protocol, Icarus. I frowned, my breath misting in the cold air. Protocol Icarus. It sounded like something out of a bad spy movie. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something stopped me. The name? Icarus. My father used to read me Greek myths when I was very small, before he disappeared, before Pamela told me he was a drunk, a loser, a man who abandoned us because he couldn't handle the responsibility of a family. I had a vague, hazy memory of a deep voice and the smell of pipe tobacco and solder. He had loved the story of Icarus. Don't fly too close to the sun, Leilani, he would say, but don't fly too close to the sea, either. People forget that part. If you fly too low, the water weighs you down. My thumb hovered over the screen. I needed warmth. I couldn't process this standing in a bank vestibule. I pushed back out into the cold and trudged 2 more blocks until I saw the neon sign of a 24-hour diner. It was a rundown place, the kind with flickering lights and sticky tables. But it was warm. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling softly. The heat hit me like a physical blow, thawing my frozen skin so fast it hurt. The waitress behind the counter, a woman with tired eyes and hair the color of straw, looked up. She took in my shivering form, the waitress uniform, the lack of a coat. Rough night, honey, she asked, her voice raspy. You have no idea, I managed to whisper. Sit anywhere. Coffee is on the house. I collapsed into a vinyl booth in the back corner, far away from the windows. I wrapped my hands around the mug she brought me, letting the heat seep into my palms. I took a sip. It was bitter and burnt, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I set the mug down and looked at my phone again. The battery was at 12%. I opened the email. It wasn't spam. It was a secure message, encrypted, requiring a biometric scan. My phone, an old model, struggled for a second before the camera recognized my face. The text unspooled on the screen. Ms. Starling, if you are reading this, it means the conditions set forth in the last will and testament of Tobias Starling has been met. Our surveillance indicates that as of 2100 hours tonight, you have been forcefully severed from your maternal family unit. The wait is over. Protocol Icarus is active. Attached is the access key for the encrypted account held at the Banque Privée in Zurich. Your father did not leave you nothing. Leilani, he left you everything. He just had to wait until you were free to give it to you. Prepare yourself. Silas Thorne, Esquire. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough to drown out the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Tobias Starling, my father, the man Pamela said had died penniless in a gutter somewhere in Nevada. I scrolled down. There was a link, an attachment. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely tap the screen. I clicked the link. A banking app interface opened one I didn't recognize. Sleek and minimalist. It asked for a passcode. The email said the passcode was the date he last saw me. I closed my eyes. I was 6 years old. It was raining. He was standing in the hallway with a suitcase. November 4th, 1999. I typed it in 11,041,999. The screen loaded, a spinning circle, and then the numbers appeared. It wasn't a few $1,000s. It wasn't a life insurance policy. Balance, $57,432,000. I stared at the number. I counted the zeros. I blinked. Sure, I was hallucinating from hypothermia. $57 million. I looked up at the diner waitress, who was wiping down the counter, looking exhausted and worried about her rent. I looked down at my own hands, red and chapped from the cold. I looked at the reflection in the dark window, a girl in a waitress uniform. Discarded, unwanted, trash. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sounding wet and jagged. My mother had thrown me out to teach me a lesson about poverty. She had staged a grand tragedy to destroy me. She thought she had taken everything. I took a sip of the bitter coffee, watching the steam rise. She had no idea. She had just handed me the weapon that would end her. The number on the screen did not disappear. $57 million. It sat there, glowing in the harsh blue light of the diner, defying the reality of my freezing hands and the smell of stale fryer grease that clung to the air. I closed the banking app and opened it again. The number remained. It was stubborn. It was real. I set the phone face down on the sticky table and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. For 29 years, I had been the extra mouth. That was the phrase Pamela used when she thought I wasn't listening, and often when she knew I was. The extra mouth. It started when I was 7. The year she married Jackson's father, a real estate developer who disappeared 2 years later with half her jewelry. I remembered sitting at the kitchen island, watching Jackson open a mountain of birthday presents, remote control cars, video games, a dirt bike while I sat with a single, small box containing a pack of socks and a generic card signed by her assistant. We have to prioritize, Leilani. Pamela had told me then, sipping her morning mimosa. Jackson is a growing boy. He has needs. You are just here. You take up space. That feeling of taking up space, of apologizing for the air I breathed, had become my second skin. When Margot was born a few years later, the dynamic cemented itself. Margot was the doll, the princess. Jackson was the golden son, the heir apparent to nothing but debt and bad manners. And I was the mistake from the first marriage, the living reminder of a man Pamela hated. My father, Tobias Starling. Your father was a loser, Pamela told me every time I asked about him. A dreamer, a drunk. He sat in his room all day staring at screens, talking about code and compression and things that don't pay the bills. He left because he couldn't handle a strong woman. He left because he didn't want you. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was a child, and she was the sun around which our dysfunctional solar system revolved. I grew up thinking my father was a vagrant who had died in a gutter, drunk and alone. The bell above the diner door jingled, pulling me out of the spiral of memory. A blast of icy wind cut through the warmth of the room. A man walked in. He did not look like the usual clientele of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Chicago at 2 a.m. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat that fit too perfectly, a cashmere scarf, and leather gloves. He was older, perhaps in his early 60s. with silver hair swept back and a face carved from granite stern. Serious, but not unkind. He scanned the room. There were only 2 truck drivers at the counter and me, shivering in my waitress uniform in the back booth. His eyes locked onto me. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward my booth, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the linoleum floor. I instinctively reached for my purse, then remembered I didn't have one. I braced myself. Had Pamela sent someone? Was this another humiliation? "Ms. Starling," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, like a car engine turning over on a cold morning. It wasn't a question. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. He slid into the booth opposite me, unbuttoning his coat with slow, precise movements. He placed a leather briefcase on the table between us. "My name is Silas Thorne," he said. "I am, or rather, I was the personal attorney and executor for the estate of Mr. Tobias Starling." The name hung in the air between us. Tobias. "My father is dead," I said, my voice sounding brittle. "He died years ago. He didn't have an estate. He didn't have anything." Silas Thorne looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of profound sadness in his gray eyes. "Is that what she told you?" "She said he was a drunk." "Your father," Thorne said, his voice tightening with suppressed anger, "was the most brilliant software architect I have ever met. He was eccentric. Yes, he was difficult, perhaps, but he was not a drunk, and he certainly did not abandon you." He opened the briefcase. Inside was a thick file and a black velvet box. "Tobias was obsessed with data," Thorne explained, clasping his hands on the table. "Specifically, the transmission of data. 20 years ago, when the internet was still finding its legs, your father was writing algorithms for video compression. He believed that one day, the entire world would watch television and movies through the internet. People called him crazy. Pamela called him useless." I sat frozen. I remembered the pipe tobacco. I remembered him muttering about packets and lossless transfer. "She divorced him right before he cracked the code," Thorne continued. "She wanted quick money. He wanted to build the future. When she kicked him out, he moved to Nevada. He lived simply, yes, but he didn't stop working. He patented a core compression algorithm, the Starling code. Ms. Starling, you cannot stream a movie on Netflix, watch a video on YouTube, or make a Zoom call today without using a piece of code your father wrote." My mouth fell open slightly. "What?" "He didn't sell the patent," Thorne said. "He licensed it, for pennies. He wanted it to be used everywhere, but he retained ownership of the underlying architecture through a holding company called Ghost Tech. It was a shell company. Nobody knew who owned it. For 2 decades. That company has been quietly accumulating value, waiting for the industry to mature." "And where is he?" I asked, a sudden, desperate hope flaring in my chest. "If he's successful, why didn't he come for me?" Thorne's expression softened. "He tried. Leilani? For 5 years after the divorce, he sent letters. He sent checks. Pamela returned every single one. She threatened restraining orders. She told him that if he came near you, she would tell the police he molested you. She held you hostage to keep him away." The air left my lungs. That sounded exactly like Pamela. The cruelty, the manipulation. "He died 5 years ago," Thorne said gently. "Congestive heart failure. He was alone in his lab. He was working until the very end. 5 years ago, I was 24 then. I was struggling to pay for my master's degree while working 2 jobs, eating instant noodles, while my father was dying alone. I have been trying to reach you since the day he passed," Thorne said. "But your mother, she is a very effective gatekeeper. She intercepted the probate notices. She blocked my calls. She knew there was something. Even if she didn't know the magnitude, she thought it was a few $100,000. Perhaps she wanted to control it." He pushed the file toward me. "Tobias knew her nature," Thorne said. "He knew that if you received this inheritance while you were under her roof, while you were seeking her approval, she would take it. She would drain you dry. He watched you from afar. Leilani. He hired investigators to check on you. He knew you were smart. He knew you were strong. But he knew you were trapped. Thorne tapped the file with his index finger. He created the Icarus Protocol, a clause in the trust. The funds were to remain locked in a blind trust in Zurich, growing, compounding, accumulating interest and royalties. They could not be touched, not even by you, until one specific condition was met. What condition? I whispered. Total severance. Thorne said, the beneficiary must be forcibly ejected or voluntarily sever all ties with the maternal family unit. You had to be free of her, tonight, when she announced your eviction on a microphone to 500 people. She didn't just humiliate you. She provided the legal documentation required to unlock the vault. I laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. Pamela's greed. Her need to perform. Her desire to crush me publicly, that was the key. If she had just been kind, if she had just let me stay in the basement, I would be penniless. The transaction closed yesterday, Thorne said. A major tech conglomerate in Silicon Valley acquired Ghost Tech. The $57 million is the post-tax buyout sum. It is clean. It is yours. And nobody, not Pamela, not Jackson, not Margot, knows it exists. He slid the black velvet box across the table. I opened it. Inside sat a heavy, matte black credit card with no numbers on the front. Just a silver chip and my name, Leilani Starling. Beside it was a smartphone, sleek and unbranded. The phone is encrypted, Thorne said. It has a direct line to my private office and your bankers in Zurich. The card has a daily spending limit of $500,000. The rest of the capital is in diversified investments. I picked up the card. It felt cold and heavy, like a weapon. You have a choice to make, Leilani, Thorne said, leaning back. You can go back to them. You can tell them everything. They will welcome you back with open arms. They will love you, suddenly and fiercely. Pamela will say she was just testing you. Jackson will ask for a loan. Margot will want to be your best friend. He paused, watching me closely. Or, he said, you can disappear. You can let them believe they won. You can let them believe you are destitute, freezing in the snow. You can watch them. I don't want to disappear, I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. I looked at the black card, then up at Thorne. I want to watch them burn. Thorne smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. Your father hoped you would say that. He left instructions for that scenario, too. He stood up and buttoned his coat. The transfer will fully clear the international banking system within 48 hours. Until then, the funds on the card are an advance from the firm. I suggest you get out of this uniform. Get some rest. You have a war to plan. Thank you, I said. It felt inadequate. Don't thank me, Thorne said. Thank Tobias. He loved you. Leilani. He named you after the sky because he wanted you to have no ceiling. Don't let them put one on you again. He walked out into the night, leaving me with $57 million and a heart full of cold fire. I waited 10 minutes. Then I stood up. I left a $100 bill on the table for the coffee, the last cash I had from my tips before the gala. The waitress's eyes would pop out of her head when she found it. I walked out of the diner. The wind was still biting, but I didn't feel it anymore. I hailed a cab, not an Uber. I didn't want the digital trail on my old account and gave the driver an address. The Peninsula, I said. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror at my stained, cheap black dress, my messy hair, my lack of a coat. That's a fancy place. Lady, you sure you got the fare? Just drive, I said. 20 minutes later, the cab pulled up to the gilded entrance of the Peninsula Chicago. The doormen, impeccable in their white uniforms, hesitated for a fraction of a second when they saw me get out. I was an anomaly. A stain on their perfect aesthetic. I walked straight to the reception desk. The lobby smelled of jasmine and money. The marble floors shone under the chandeliers. A woman with a tight bun and a judgmental stare stood behind the counter. She looked me up and down, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone implying that the service entrance was around the back. I need a room, I said. A suite, ideally the lake suite, if it is available. The receptionist let out a short, incredulous breath. Miss, our rooms start at $800 a night. The lake suite is $4,000. Perhaps there is a hostel downtown that would be more suited to your budget. She glanced meaningfully at the door, signaling security with her eyes. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into the pocket of my stained apron, pulled out the matte black card, and placed it gently on the marble counter. It made a solid, heavy thud. The receptionist froze. She knew what that card was. In the hospitality industry, you learn to recognize the Centurion, the Palladium, and the private banking cards of the ultra-wealthy. She looked from the card to me, her face draining of color. I will be staying indefinitely, I said softly, and I require total discretion. If anyone asks, I am not here. Oh, and I need a personal shopper sent to the room in the morning. I seem to have misplaced my luggage. Her demeanor flipped instantly. It was pathetic. Really? Of course, Ms. Starling, my deepest apologies. Right away. Let me get the manager to escort you personally. I took the key card she handed me with trembling hands. I walked to the elevator, my head held high. As the doors closed, shutting out the world, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked like a wreck. I looked like a victim. But under the dirt and the exhaustion, I saw something else. I saw Tobias Starling's daughter. And for the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel like an extra mouth to feed. I felt like the person holding the knife. The sheets in the lake suite at the peninsula were made of Egyptian cotton with a thread count so high it felt like sleeping on a cloud. I woke up to a view that would have cost my mother a month of fundraising to afford the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan stretching out under a steel gray sky. Beautiful and indifferent. I stretched, my limbs heavy with the first real sleep I had managed in years. There was no banging on the ceiling, no screeching voice demanding I scrub the baseboards. Just silence, thick and expensive. I rolled over and grabbed the encrypted phone Silas Thorne had given me. It was blinking with a new notification. New audio surveillance available. Source 1424 Highland Park Estate. I sat up, pulling the plush hotel robe around my shoulders. Thorne worked fast. He hadn't just given me money. He had given me eyes and ears. While I was sleeping, his team had evidently been busy turning my childhood home into a reality TV show that only I was watching. I ordered room service eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, and a pot of coffee that didn't taste like mud and sat at the desk to listen. The first recording was time-stamped at 3 a.m. Just hours after they had thrown me out, I expected to hear a party. I expected popping corks and laughter about the trash taking itself out. Instead, I heard screaming. You said it was a sure thing. That was Pamela's voice, shrill and unmasked. You said crypto was the future. Jackson, you said we would double the investment in a month. It was a market correction. Mom, it crashed overnight. Jackson sounded like a cornered animal. His voice cracked. I didn't know the exchange was going to fold. Nobody knew. How much? Pamela demanded. How much is gone? There was a silence on the tape, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Everything, Jackson whispered. And I leveraged the shop. I borrowed against the inventory, and I took a bridge loan from some guys in South Side. They are not banks. Mom, they don't send late notices. They send guys with baseball bats. How much? Jackson. $2 million. I took a bite of a strawberry, the sweetness exploding in my mouth. $2 million. My brother, the genius entrepreneur who mocked my 9-to-5 job, had gambled away a fortune on digital coins and lost. The recording shifted. Now it was Pamela on the phone, her voice lowered to a frantic whisper. She was talking to her accountant. What do you mean the auditors are coming on Monday? The Heart of Gold Gala just happened. The funds are not settled. No, you cannot look at the operating account. I moved some things around to cover the liquidity issue with the house. Listen to me, you incompetent fool. If they see the withdrawal for the renovations, We are all going to prison. Fix it. I leaned back, sipping my coffee. The mighty Starling family was not just rotting, it was collapsing. Pamela had been embezzling from her own charity to pay for her lifestyle. And Jackson had torched their safety net. They were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. The next recording was from early this morning. A new voice entered the room. I recognized it immediately, Marcus Reynolds, the family's slimy attorney who had helped Pamela hide assets during her second divorce. I did some digging like you asked. Pam, Reynolds said. His voice was oily. About Tobias. You were right to be worried when that law firm sniffed around a few years back. Did he leave her money? Pamela asked. I could hear the hunger in her voice. If he left that ungrateful girl a single dime, I want it. I paid for her food for 29 years. I am entitled to reimbursement. It is murky, Reynolds said. Tobias died quietly, but there is a trust. My contacts at the courthouse say there is an unclaimed asset packet. It looks like residuals from some old patents. Nothing massive. Maybe $200,000. Perhaps $300,000 if we are lucky. I laughed out loud in the empty suite. 300,000. They were off by about 57 million. 300,000, Jackson said, his voice trembling with hope. That covers the interest on the loan. That buys me time with the guys from Southside. We need that money. But it is in her name, Reynolds warned. She has to claim it. And since you just publicly disowned her, she might not be inclined to share. She is weak, Pamela scoffed. She has always been weak. She is probably freezing on a park bench right now, crying and waiting for me to save her. We don't tell her it is 300,000. We tell her it is a small stipend, maybe 5,000. We tell her we will let her come home if she signs it over to the family trust for safekeeping and management. Get her back here, Jackson said. Now, I closed the laptop. The game was set. They thought they were hunting a mouse. They didn't know they were baiting a trap for a tiger. I needed to see the public face of this operation. I opened Instagram. Margot had been busy. She had posted a photo of us from 5 years ago, one where she looked perfect, and I looked washed out in bad lighting. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. My heart is literally breaking right now. My sister Leilani has been struggling with mental health issues for years, and last night she had a breakdown and ran away. We are so scared. It is freezing outside. Leilani, if you see this, please come home. Mom is crying. We just want you safe. Missing person. Mental health awareness. Pray for Leilani. The comments were flooding in. You are such a good sister, Margot. I hope she gets the help she needs. So brave of you to share this. It was nauseating. They were using my disappearance, which they caused, to farm engagement and play the victim. I walked to the mirror. I looked too healthy. My skin was glowing from the expensive face cream provided by the hotel. My hair was clean. This wouldn't do. I spent the next hour reconstructing my misery. I didn't wash my face. I rubbed a little dark eyeshadow under my eyes to create exhaustion circles. I put my hair up in a messy, greasy bun. I took off the silk robe and put on the stained, wrinkled waitress uniform I had arrived in. I looked in the mirror. There she was, the victim, the loser. I picked up the burner phone I had bought at a convenience store earlier, not the encrypted one, and dialed Margot's number. She answered on the first ring. Hello? Her voice was sharp, annoyed. Margot. I made my voice shake. I let a little sob escape. It's me. Leilani. The tone switched instantly to fake concern, likely because she was around people. Oh my God. Where are you? We have been worried sick. I don't know, I stammered. I'm near a bridge. It's so cold. Margot, I don't have anywhere to go. My feet are bleeding. Oh, you poor thing, she cooed. Mom is a wreck. She didn't mean what she said last night. It was just tough love. She wants you to come home. She does. Yes, come home right now. We will make you hot cocoa. We can talk. We just want to fix this. Okay, I whispered. I'm coming. Please don't be mad. We could never be mad at you, Margot said. Just hurry. I hung up. I stared at the phone for a second, then tossed it onto the bed. "Showtime," I muttered. I took a cab to the edge of our neighborhood, specifically asking the driver to drop me off 2 blocks away so I could walk the rest. I needed to look like I had trekked through the snow. By the time I reached the wrought iron gates of the Starling estate, my legs were genuinely numb, and my nose was running. The physical discomfort helped anchor the performance. I punched in the gate code. It still worked. Of course it did. They needed me to get in. I walked up the long, winding driveway. The house loomed ahead, a massive pseudo-Victorian mansion that Pamela pretended was ancestral but had actually been built in the 90s. The lights were blazing. I knocked on the front door. It swung open immediately. Pamela stood there. She wasn't wearing her gala gown anymore, but she was dressed in a silk blouse and slacks, looking like the grieving mother of the year. "Leilani!" she cried out, pulling me into a hug that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and desperation. Her grip was tight, painful. "Oh, thank God. You look terrible. I'm sorry, Mom," I whimpered, letting myself go limp in her arms. "I'm so sorry." Shh, it's okay. Come inside. You're freezing." She ushered me into the living room. A fire was roaring in the fireplace, a nice touch for the ambiance. Jackson was sitting on the leather sofa, looking pale and sweaty, bouncing his leg nervously. Margot was positioned by the window, phone in hand, subtly recording. "Hey, Leilani," Jackson said, trying to sound casual but failing. His eyes darted to my hands, looking for, what, a lawyer's card, a checkbook. He saw nothing but red, chapped skin. He relaxed visibly. "Sit down," Pamela said, guiding me to the stiff armchair, the one nobody was ever allowed to sit in because it was vintage Italian. "Margot, get your sister some water." Margot brought me a glass of tap water, not even ice. "We have been doing a lot of thinking," Pamela started, sitting opposite me and crossing her legs. She adopted her boardroom voice, the one she used when she was trying to charm a donor out of a check. "Last night was intense, but it was necessary. We needed to shake you up, Leilani. To make you see reality." "I see it," I said, staring at the floor. "I have nothing without you. I know that now." Jackson smirked. He couldn't help himself. "Exactly," Pamela said. "But we are not monsters. We are family, and family protects its own. We want you to stay, but we need to set some ground rules. Structure, legal structure." She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a thick document bound in a blue folder. "What is that?" I asked, widening my eyes. "It is a rental guarantee." Pamela lied smoothly. "And a guardianship agreement. Since you have proven you cannot handle your own affairs, look at you. Homeless in less than 12 hours, this gives me the legal right to manage your finances and housing. It basically says I will put a roof over your head, and in exchange, you trust me to handle any paperwork that comes your way, including any small debts or assets from your father's side." "My father—" I looked up, feigning confusion. "But he didn't have anything. Just some old junk," Jackson interjected quickly. "But we need to clear it out to protect you from his creditors. If you sign this, we handle his debt, we handle your rent, and you get your room back." "The basement?" I asked. "The basement," Pamela confirmed. "For now." I reached for the document. My hands were shaking, partly from the residual cold, partly from the sheer adrenaline of holding their destruction in my hands. I opened it. It was thick with legal jargon, but I had spent the last 6 months reading contracts for my data analytics job. I knew what to look for: power of attorney, irrevocable transfer of assets, beneficiary reassignment. It wasn't a rental agreement. It was a complete surrender. If I signed this, Pamela could drain the Swiss account before I could even access it. She would take the $57 million, pay off Jackson's loan sharks, fill the hole in her charity fund, and then throw me back on the street with nothing. They sat there, watching me. 3 vultures circling a dying animal. Pamela leaned forward, holding out a gold Mont Blanc pen. "Just sign right there on the last page." "Sweetie," she said, "then you can go downstairs and sleep. You look so tired. I took the pen. I held it over the paper. I hesitated. I let the pen hover. What is it? Jackson snapped. Just sign it. I'm feeling really dizzy, I said, swaying slightly in the chair. I haven't eaten in 24 hours. The words are swimming. I can't read it clearly. You don't need to read it, Margot said, rolling her eyes. It just says Mom loves you. God, you are so dramatic. I really want to sign, I said, looking at Pamela with teary eyes. I want to come home. But can I just eat something first? Just a sandwich? My hands are shaking too much to write my name. Pamela looked at Jackson. Jackson looked at the clock. He was thinking about the loan sharks. He needed that signature tonight. Fine, Pamela said, standing up sharply. Margot, go make her a sandwich. Hurry up. Why me? Margot whined. Do it, Pamela barked. As Margot stomped to the kitchen, I lowered the pen. Thank you, Mom. You're so good to me. I am, she said, smoothing her blouse. I am the only one who cares about you. Leilani. Never forget that. I looked down at the contract again. I wasn't going to sign it. Of course, but I wasn't going to leave yet either. I needed them to admit it. I needed them to say the quiet part out loud so the recording device taped to my chest right under my bra strap could catch it all. So this handles Dad's debts? I asked innocently. I heard he owed a lot of money. Yes, Pamela said, her eyes gleaming. Huge debts. But don't worry, there might be a tiny bit of money left over, maybe a few thousand. If there is, I'll put it in a savings account for you. For a rainy day. A few thousand, I repeated. That would be nice. Don't get your hopes up, Jackson muttered. Just eat your sandwich and sign the paper. I sat back, clutching the heavy gold pen. I was inside. They thought they had won. They thought I was the same stupid, desperate girl who had left yesterday. But as the smell of Margot burning toast drifted from the kitchen, I smiled internally. I wasn't signing anything, but I was about to rewrite their entire reality. The gold Mont Blanc pen felt heavy and cold in my fingers, like holding a live wire. Pamela was staring at me, her eyes wide with a predatory anticipation that she could barely mask with her practiced smile. Jackson was bouncing his leg so hard the coffee table was vibrating, rattling the china cup Margot had placed there. They were hungry, they were desperate, and they were terrifyingly close to getting what they wanted. I looked down at the document. The signature line was right there, a blank space waiting to swallow my future. I need a different pen, I muttered, my voice trembling. I wasn't acting anymore. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made my hands shake violently. This one. The ink is skipping. It is a Mont Blanc. Leilani, Pamela snapped, her patience fraying at the edges. It does not skip. Just sign the paper. I can't, I whined, dropping the pen onto the table. It clattered loudly. My hand is cramping. I need to shake it out. Give me a second. I pulled my hand back and rubbed my wrist, casting a glance at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 9:41 at night. Silas Thorne had told me the Swiss banks opened at 8 in the morning Zurich time. That was 1 in the morning Chicago time. But the automated clearinghouse for the wire transfer operated on a different schedule. He had said the notification would hit my secure device the moment the funds were verified and deposited into the new holding account. I was counting seconds. 1, 2, 3. You are stalling, Jackson said, his voice low and dangerous. He leaned forward, the smell of stale sweat and expensive cologne wafting off him. Why are you stalling? I'm not. I shrank back, playing the part of the terrified little sister. I'm scared. Jackson, this is a big legal document. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. You are doing the only thing that keeps you off the street. Margot chimed in from the window, not even looking up from her phone, and then I felt it. It wasn't a ring, it wasn't a ping, it was a specific 3-pulse vibration pattern from the burner phone hidden deep in the pocket of my waitress apron. It was the signal. My heart stopped, then restarted with a violent thud against my ribs. I needed to check. I had to see it with my own eyes. "I think I'm going to be sick," I gasped, clutching my stomach. "The sandwich. Margot, did you use the old mayonnaise? I feel like I'm going to throw up." "Oh, for God's sake," Pamela groaned, throwing her hands up. "Go to the powder room. Hurry up, and wash your face while you are in there. You look like a raccoon." I scrambled up, knocking the chair back, and bolted toward the hallway. I didn't go to the powder room. I ducked into the small alcove under the stairs, a blind spot in the house's layout, and whipped the phone out. The screen illuminated the dark space. Message received: Banque Privée Zurich. Status completed. Amount $57 million. Available balance $57,432,000. I stared at the screen. The number was so long it almost didn't fit on the line. $57 million. In that split second, the air in the house changed. The looming ceilings, the oppressive portraits of ancestors who didn't know I existed, the heavy velvet drapes, it all shrank. Suddenly, this wasn't a fortress of terror. It was just a house with a mortgage. A house filled with people who were drowning in debt while I stood there, silently holding a life raft made of solid gold. I looked at the door to the living room. I could hear them bickering. "She is useless," Jackson was saying. "Even at surrendering, she is incompetent." "She will sign," Pamela assured him. "She has nowhere else to go." A cold smile spread across my face. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who just realized they were the only person in the room with a loaded gun. I didn't go back to the living room. I didn't flush the toilet to fake illness. I slipped my shoes off, holding them in my hand, and crept down the hallway to the servants' entrance at the back of the kitchen. It was the door they used to make me use when I was a teenager so I wouldn't track mud into the foyer. I unlocked it silently. The winter air bit at my face, but it felt like freedom. I ran. I sprinted across the frozen lawn, my socks soaking in the snow, toward the black sedan idling down the street, its lights off. The back door clicked open before I even reached it. I dove inside, shivering, and slammed the door shut. The interior was warm, smelling of leather and safety. Silas Thorne sat in the front seat, looking at me through the rearview mirror. "It is done," he asked. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. I held up the phone, showing him the screen. "It is done," Thorne nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. "Good. Then we leave, before they realize the mouse has not just stolen the cheese, but bought the trap." As the car pulled away, I watched the lights of the mansion fade into the distance. My phone started buzzing again, calls from Pamela, texts from Jackson. They were furious. They thought I had run away because I was scared. They thought I was wandering the streets, a penniless idiot who had walked away from their generous offer of a basement cell. Let them think that. Let them sleep soundly tonight, dreaming of how they would punish me when I inevitably crawled back. They had no idea that the Leilani who crawled back would be an illusion, while the real Leilani was about to dismantle their lives brick by brick. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in deception, by day. I was the Leilani they expected. I wore my old clothes, the frayed jeans, the oversized gray sweater that had a hole in the cuff. I trudged through my old neighborhood, looking disheveled and lost. I made sure people saw me. I sat in the local library for hours, pretending to look for minimum wage jobs on the public computers. But I wasn't looking for jobs. I was downloading software, keyloggers, audio surveillance apps. I was building a digital arsenal. I went to the local coffee shop where the baristas knew me and asked if I could have a cup of hot water for free. I sat by the window, looking pathetic, while secretly using a long-range directional microphone Thorne had provided to record conversations from the sidewalk. I needed evidence. I needed to prove not just that they were mean, but that they were criminal. But by night, I ascended. I didn't return to the hotel. Thorne had arranged something more permanent, more secure. A penthouse apartment on the 45th floor of a Glass Needle overlooking the Gold Coast. It was a corporate rental, registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The first night I walked in, I just stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lay spread out below me like a circuit board, humming with energy, the Ritz-Carlton, where I had been scrubbing floors 2 days ago, looked like a toy house from this height. "This is headquarters," Thorne said, placing a stack of files on the marble dining table. "We have forensic accountants working in shifts. We have already pulled the preliminary credit reports and asset traces on all 3 of them." I turned away from the view and sat at the table. "Show me." Thorne opened the first file. It was labeled Jackson Starling. "Your brother," Thorne said, adjusting his glasses, "is not just a bad businessman, he is a felon. We found 7 separate student loans taken out between 2015 and 2018. Jackson didn't go to grad school," I frowned. "He dropped out of business school after 1 semester. "The loans were not for him," Thorne said quietly. "They were taken out in the name of Leilani Starling." I froze. I grabbed the paper. There it was, my social security number, my date of birth, signatures that looked vaguely like mine, but with a flourish I never used. $140,000 in student debt, I whispered, reading the numbers. "I paid my own way through state college. I didn't have loans." "He took them out online," Thorne explained. "He used your identity. The disbursement checks were sent to a P&O box he controls. He used the money to fund his lifestyle startup, which, as far as we can tell, was just a series of trips to Las Vegas." "That is fraud," I said. "That is federal wire fraud." "It is," Thorne agreed. "But it gets worse." He opened the second file. Margot Starling. "Margot has a credit score of 400, Thorne noted dryly. "But she has been living a life of luxury. We found 3 credit cards opened in your name 2 years ago. The statements are enlightening." I flipped through the pages. Doctor, Miami Plastic Surgery Center, Neiman Marcus, VIP, table service, the Underground. "She got a nose job," I said, my finger tracing the charge for $12,000. "She told everyone it was a deviated septum that Mom paid to fix. She put it on a card in my name. And she defaulted on the payments 6 months ago," Thorne said. "The collections agency has been sending letters to an address in Gary, Indiana, a fake address they set up so you wouldn't see the mail." I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. It wasn't the money. I had $57 million now. I could pay these debts with the change in my pocket. It was the violation. They hadn't just ignored me. They had cannibalized me. They had been eating my future piece by piece while calling me a burden. "And Pamela?" I asked, looking at the thickest file. Thorne sighed. He looked almost impressed by the audacity of it. "This one requires some explanation," he said. "When your father died, the house you grew up in, the one you were just in, was technically marital property. The divorce decree gave Pamela the right to live there, but the title was to be split 50-50 between her and Tobias. When Tobias died, his 50% share passed to you." "I own half that house," I asked, stunned. "You do. But Pamela filed a quitclaim deed 4 years ago. She forged your signature. Leilani. She transferred your 50% to herself for the sum of $1. I stared at the photocopy of the deed. The signature was a clumsy forgery, barely even trying to look like mine. "Why?" I asked. "Just to own it. To leverage it," Thorne said. "Once she had full title, she took out a second mortgage, and a third. She pulled out nearly $3 million in equity. She used it to prop up her charity, to pay for the gala, to cover Jackson's losses. The house is underwater. If the bank forecloses, and they will, because she is 3 months behind on payments, they would have come after you if your name was still on the deed. But since she forged the transfer, she has committed bank fraud, and since she used the U.S. mail to send the documents—" "Mail fraud," I finished. "RICO charges. This is organized crime." "Essentially," Thorne nodded. "It is a criminal enterprise disguised as a suburban family." I stood up and walked back to the window. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't see the scared girl anymore. I saw a prosecutor. I saw a judge. I saw an executioner. Can we prove it? I asked. Can we prove I didn't sign those papers? We can, Thorne said. We have handwriting experts ready. We have the IP addresses used to apply for the loans, which trace back to Jackson's laptop. We have the medical records for Margot's surgery. It is a slam dunk. So we go to the police. We could, Thorne said. We could have them arrested tomorrow, but that is too easy, I said, turning back to him. Thorne smiled that shark-like smile. Prison is a punishment. Yes. But for people like Pamela and Margot, the loss of reputation is worse than the loss of freedom. And for Jackson, the loss of his business genius persona is a fate worse than death. I don't want to just arrest them, I said, my voice steady and cold. I want to own them. I want to hold the debt. I want to be the one knocking on the door. Then we proceed with the acquisition, Thorne said. I have set up a shell company, Nemesis Holdings. We will contact the banks holding their bad debt. We will buy the notes for pennies on the dollar. Within 2 weeks, you won't just be their sister, you will be their landlord, their banker, and their worst nightmare. I looked at the files spread out on the table, the anatomy of my family's betrayal. Do it, I said. Buy it all, every cent of debt they have. I want to own the shirt on Jackson's back and the nose on Margot's face. I picked up the burner phone. 5 missed calls from Pamela. She left a voicemail. Leilani, where are you? You are being so selfish. We are worried sick. Come home and sign the papers. Stop being a child. I deleted the message. I am not a child anymore, Mother, I whispered to the empty room. I am the bank. The silence from my end was driving them insane. I knew it. For 3 days, I had been a ghost. I hadn't answered a single text, hadn't logged into my personal email, and hadn't been seen in the city. To a narcissist like Pamela, silence is an insult. To a desperate debtor like Jackson, silence is terrifying. To a fame-hungry influencer like Margot, silence is a vacuum that needs to be filled with content. On the morning of the 4th day, they decided to fill it. I was sitting at the Marble Island in the penthouse, reviewing a spreadsheet of Jackson's outstanding liabilities, when my burner phone started vibrating so hard it walked itself across the counter. It wasn't a call, it was notifications, hundreds of them. Margot Starling mentioned you in a story. Margot Starling tagged you in a post. New comment. Thief? New comment. How could you do that to your own mother? New comment. Trash. I sighed, put down my coffee mug, and opened Instagram on the secure tablet Thorne had provided. There it was, the nuclear option. Margot had posted a reel. It was high production value, clearly edited with professional lighting, and a filter that made her skin look porcelain and her eyes look huge and watery. She was sitting on her bed, hugging a pillow, wearing a hoodie that looked oversized to emphasize her vulnerability. Hey guys, Margot whispered to the camera, wiping away a non-existent tear. I didn't want to make this video. I really didn't. We wanted to handle this privately. But since Leilani has decided to ghost us and run away, I feel like I have to speak my truth. She took a shaky breath. Great acting. She should have gone to drama school instead of buying followers. You guys know my sister left the other night. What I didn't tell you, what my mom was too heartbroken to say, is why she really ran. The video cut to a photo of an empty jewelry box, a black velvet box that I recognized immediately. It used to hold Pamela's emerald necklace, a piece she had inherited from her grandmother. She took it, Margot said, her voice cracking. She stole Grandma's emerald necklace. It was the only thing Mom had left of her mother. It is worth, like, $50,000. We think she pawned it to buy drugs. We tried to stop her. That is why Mom was so upset at the gala. We were trying to stage an intervention, and she snapped. I sat back, staring at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. Pamela had sold that emerald necklace 3 years ago to pay for a settlement when Jackson crashed his Porsche into a parked car while drunk. I knew it because I was the one who drove her to the pawn shop in the Gold Coast. The video continued. "We don't want to press charges," Margot sobbed. "We just want the necklace back. Leilani, if you are watching this, please, just bring it home. We forgive you." The caption read, "When family betrays you. Broken heart justice for Pamela Thief. Heartbroken addiction. Awareness, the internet. Predictably, lit the torches. User_299. Dox her. Find this girl. Cheetown_girly. I saw her at the gala. She looked totally wasted. Disgusting. Justice for you. Imagine stealing from your own mom. I hope she rots." Within 2 hours. The video had 400,000 views. My LinkedIn profile was bombarded with hate mail. Someone had found my old high school yearbook photo and photoshopped prison bars over my face. Internet sleuths were analyzing the background of my old posts to try and figure out where I might be hiding. "Cancel culture at its finest," a voice said behind me. I turned. Silas Thorne was standing in the doorway of the penthouse study. Beside him stood a young man who looked about 22, wearing a hoodie and holding a laptop covered in stickers. "Leilani, meet Kieran," Thorne said. "He runs the cyber intelligence unit at Vanguard Security. I thought we might need him." Kieran nodded at me, unbothered by the gravity of the situation. "Nice to meet you. Your sister is sloppy. By the way—" "Excuse me?" I asked. Kieran set his laptop on the island and spun it around. "We ran a diagnostic on the engagement of Margot's video. See this spike here? 10,000 likes in 3 minutes at 4 in the morning. That is not organic. She bought a bot farm in Eastern Europe to boost the post. She is paying to ruin your reputation. Can we prove it?" I asked. "Already did?" Kieran tapped a key. I traced the payment for the bots. It came from a PayPal account linked to an email Margot Starling Business Gmail.com. I also pulled the metadata from the photo of the empty jewelry box. The photo was taken 3 years ago. See the timestamp. She didn't take that photo today. She pulled it from her cloud archive. "Save everything," I said, my voice cold. "Every comment, every threat, every lie. I want a record of every single person who participates in this witch hunt." "Way ahead of you," Kieran said. "I am also scrubbing your digital footprint in real time. The internet sleuths won't find you here. I have bounced your signal through servers in Singapore and Iceland. As far as the internet is concerned, Leilani Starling has vanished off the face of the earth." Thorne stepped forward, placing a thick leather binder on the table. "While Kieran handles the court of public opinion, I have been busy in the court of commerce. You asked me to look into Jackson's debts." I looked at the binder. The label read, "Nemesis Holdings, Acquisition 001. "The loan sharks," I said. "They were surprisingly reasonable," Thorne said with a dry smile. "It turns out, holding bad debt from a failed crypto bro is not their favorite asset class. They were happy to unload the note for 80 cents on the dollar. Nemesis Holdings. Your shell company is now the sole owner of Jackson's $2.1 million debt." I opened the binder. There was the transfer agreement. The Southside guys were out. I was in. "And the bank loans?" I asked. "We purchased the distressed assets this morning," Thorne confirmed. The bank that holds the note on his failed auto shop equipment was preparing to write it off. We offered them cash. They took it. I ran my finger over the signature line. I signed as Director of Nemesis Holdings. "Does he know?" I asked. "He knows his debt was sold," Thorne said. "He received a notification an hour ago that a new entity holds his paper. He has no idea that entity is the sister he is currently calling a thief on the internet." "Good," I said. "Let him sweat." "What are the terms?" "The terms are immediate repayment upon demand," Thorne said. "You can pull the trigger whenever you want. You can seize his car, his watch, and garnish any future wages he might pretend to earn." "Not yet," I said, closing the binder. "Let him think he has time." The television in the living room was on, tuned to a local Chicago news channel. Breaking news, the anchor announced. Philanthropist Pamela Starling addresses the rumors surrounding the theft at the Heart of Gold Gala. I walked to the sofa and turned up the volume. Pamela was standing on the steps of the courthouse, a strategic choice of location to imply legal seriousness. She was wearing black, a simple pearl necklace ironic, and no makeup. She looked devastated. "I come to you today with a heavy heart," Pamela told the cluster of microphones. "My daughter Leilani is troubled. We have tried to help her, but addiction is a disease. The theft of my mother's heirloom is painful, but what is more painful is seeing my child lost." She wiped her eyes. A camera flashed. "However," Pamela continued, her voice strengthening, "I will not let this tragedy stop the good work we do. The Heart of Gold Foundation must go on. In fact, in honor of Leilani's struggle, I am launching a new initiative today, the Second Chance Fund. We are asking for donations to help families dealing with difficult children." I stared at the screen. She was monetizing my defamation. She was using the lie about me being a thief to raise money that I knew she would use to pay off the auditors. "And," Pamela added, "I want to thank my corporate partners, specifically Vital Glow Supplements, for standing by our family during this crisis. Their new line of wellness products has been keeping me healthy through this stress." She held up a bottle of pills. Product placement. In the middle of a family crisis press conference. "Vital Glow," I repeated. "Kieran, look them up," Kieran typed furiously. "Got them? Multi-level marketing scheme. Basically a pyramid scheme selling caffeine pills disguised as vitamins. Pamela is their chief brand ambassador. She gets a 20% cut of all sales in the Midwest region." "Who is their biggest competitor?" I asked. "Pure Life Organics," Kieran said instantly. "They are a legitimate company based in Seattle. They have been trying to break into the Chicago market, but Pamela's influence with the socialite crowd has blocked them." I turned to Thorne. "How much is $57 million in the grand scheme of things?" "It is significant leverage," Thorne said. "Take $5 million, I said. "Invested in Pure Life Organics, today. But I want a condition attached to the investment. I want them to launch an aggressive marketing campaign in Chicago, specifically targeting the false health claims of Vital Glow. I want billboards. I want Instagram ads. I want scientific studies exposing Vital Glow as snake oil." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Corporate warfare." "She is attacking my reputation," I said, pointing at the screen where Pamela was hugging a supporter. "I am attacking her revenue stream. If Vital Glow goes down, her monthly check disappears. And without that check, she can't pay the mortgage on the house she stole from me." "Consider it done," Thorne said, typing a note on his phone. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a hate message. It was an email from my old personal account, the one I hadn't checked in days. I opened it. Subject: exclusive invitation. Private real estate auction. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't sent to me directly. It was a forwarded email chain that had accidentally included my old work address because Pamela was sloppy with her reply all functions. I read the text. "Dear select investors, due to unforeseen liquidity requirements, the owner of the estate at 1424 Highland Park Drive has elected to offer the property for expedited sale via private auction. Date tomorrow, 2:00 p.m. Starting bid, $1.5 million, cash offers only." I stood up, the blood rushing in my ears. "She is selling the house," I said. "She knows the charity money won't come in fast enough to save her from the auditors, so she is liquidating the asset, my asset." Thorne looked at the email over my shoulder. "She cannot sell it legally. The title is clouded because of the forgery. She doesn't care about legal," I said. "She is looking for a cash buyer who won't ask questions until it is too late. She wants to take the money and run before the bank realizes the fraud." I looked at the date. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. "I need an invitation," I said. "It is a closed list," Thorne warned. "Only known high net worth individuals," I smiled. I walked over to the mirror and looked at myself, no longer the tired waitress, but the woman who owned her brother's debt and was about to destroy her mother's business. Good thing I know a very wealthy investor, I said. Nemesis Holdings is looking to expand its real estate portfolio, isn't it? Thorne grinned. I believe it is. Get me in that room, Silas, I said. I don't just want to stop the sale. I want to buy it. I want to buy the roof over her head while she is standing under it. I looked back at the screen, where Margot was now live streaming a Get Ready With Me video, talking about how traumatized she was while applying expensive concealer. Keep the bots tracking them. Kieran, I ordered. Let them have their fun on the internet for one more day. Tomorrow, we take the battle offline. The internet thought I was a thief hiding in the shadows. They were about to learn that I wasn't hiding, I was waiting. And I was bringing a checkbook that could swallow their entire world whole. The heated leather seat of the surveillance van was the only warm thing in Chicago that morning. Outside, sleet was hammering against the metal roof, turning the city into a gray, slushy mess. Inside, the monitors glowed with the high-definition feed from a pinhole camera Kieran had managed to install in my mother's study, disguised as a screw on a light switch. Silas Thorne sat next to me, headphones around his neck, sipping black coffee. Here we go, he whispered. On the screen, Pamela was pacing. She looked manic. Her hair was a little too perfect, her movements a little too sharp. Sitting at my father's old mahogany desk was a man I didn't recognize, a notary public with a sweating forehead and a cheap suit. You are sure this will hold up? Pamela asked, her voice tinny through the speakers. If the buyer checks the registry shows the transfer is pending, the notary said, his voice shaking. I am backdating the stamp to 3 years ago. Mrs. Starling, as far as anyone can tell, Leilani signed this quitclaim deed before she became unstable. Good, Pamela snapped. She slid a thick envelope across the desk. Here is $5,000. Cash. You were never here. The notary took the envelope. He raised his stamp. Thud. Thorne hit a key on his laptop. Got it? High-resolution capture of the forgery in progress. We have the audio, the video, and the exchange of the bribe. Should we call the police now? I asked, watching the man on the screen shake Pamela's hand. And spoil the fun. Thorne shook his head. If we arrest her now, the auction is cancelled. She claims insanity or duress. The house goes into probate hell for years. No, Leilani, we need her to commit the fraud against a buyer. We need her to sign a contract that ties her own noose. I looked at the screen, where Pamela was smiling, holding the document that supposedly stripped me of my birthright. She thought she was erasing me. She had no idea she was signing her own death warrant. Let's get you ready, Thorne said. The auction starts in 2 hours. The transformation took 45 minutes. I sat in the back of the van while a stylist Thorne had hired a woman who usually worked for opera companies went to work. She tucked my long, dark hair under a wig of severe, architectural blonde bob. She applied makeup that sharpened my features, giving me cheekbones that could cut glass and lips painted a deep, aggressive crimson. She fitted me with thick-rimmed, non-prescription glasses that obscured my eyes just enough to hide the recognition, but not the intelligence. I traded my waitress uniform for a tailored Navy power suit that screamed corporate efficiency, the kind that cost $3,000 and commanded silence when you walked into a room. Who am I? I asked, looking in the mirror. I didn't look like Leilani Starling, the pathetic daughter. I looked like a shark. You are Veronica Vane, Thorne said, handing me a leather portfolio. Executive assistant to the private equity fund Chimera Capital. Your employer is reclusive, eccentric, and currently stuck in Tokyo. He wants the property at 1424 Highland Park Drive, and he has authorized you to outbid everyone. And the trap, inside the portfolio, Thorne said. The purchase agreement, standard language, except for Clause 17, the clean title guarantee. It states that if any fraud is discovered regarding the ownership history, the seller is liable for a penalty of 200% of the final sale price, payable immediately upon breach. She won't sign that, I said. It is suicide. She will sign it, Thorne replied, checking his watch. because greed makes people blind. And because you are going to offer her so much money, she will forget how to read. The auction was being held in a private conference room at the Four Seasons. It was a silent auction, meant for discreet investors who bought distressed properties before they hit the public market. The air smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. I walked in at 1:55 in the afternoon. I kept my head high, my stride purposeful. I saw them immediately. Pamela was sitting at the front table, flanked by Jackson and their slimy lawyer, Marcus Reynolds. They looked like a tableau of nervous energy. Pamela was twisting her pearl necklace. Jackson was tapping his foot, checking his phone every 30 seconds, probably looking for threats from the loan sharks I had just bought out. They looked up as I entered. Their eyes slid right over me. They saw the suit, the wig, the attitude. They saw money. They did not see the daughter they had thrown into the snow 4 days ago. I took a seat in the back, crossing my legs and opening my portfolio. I put a Bluetooth earpiece in my ear, tapping it as if I were on an important call. The auctioneer, a man with a monotone voice, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. We are here to offer the property at 1424 Highland Park Drive, a magnificent estate. We have a starting bid of $1,500,000. A heavy-set man in the front row raised his paddle. 1.5. 1,500,000. Thank you, the auctioneer droned. 1.6. A woman in a red coat countered. Pamela leaned forward, her eyes darting between the bidders. She needed this. She needed enough to pay the auditors, pay off Jackson's mess, and keep up appearances. 1.6 million wouldn't cut it. She needed at least 3. I waited. The bidding slowed at $2 million. The heavy-set man shook his head and put his paddle down. "Going once at 2 million, the auctioneer said. Pamela looked like she was going to be sick. 2 million wasn't enough. I raised my paddle. $3 million. The room went silent. Heads turned. Jackson spun around in his chair so fast he nearly tipped it over. Pamela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. 3 million to the lady in the back, the auctioneer said, his voice perking up. 3.1. The woman in the red coat tried. Sounding unsure, I tapped my earpiece, pretending to listen to a voice on the line. I spoke clearly, loud enough for the room to hear. "Yes, sir. Understood. The view is non-negotiable." I looked at the auctioneer. $4 million. A collective murmur rippled through the room. This was absurd. The house was worth 2.5 at best. 4 million was irrational. It was the kind of money that solved every problem Pamela had and bought her a vacation home in France. Pamela was trembling. I could see the greed overriding the fear in her eyes. She was practically vibrating. She looked at Marcus Reynolds, who was grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Going once," the auctioneer said, sweating. "Going twice. $4,500,000, I said calmly. "Final offer? Cash? Closing today?" Bam. "Sold," the auctioneer shouted, slamming his gavel. "To the lady in the navy suit for $4,500,000. Pamela jumped up and hugged Jackson. They were laughing. They were saved. They had just netted a fortune for a house they didn't legally own. I walked to the front of the room. Pamela turned to me, beaming with a warmth she had never shown me in 29 years. "Oh, thank you," she gushed, reaching for my hand. "You have no idea what this means to our family. Your employer has excellent taste." "He demands excellence," I said, my voice pitched an octave lower than normal, clipped and professional. I ignored her hand. "He also demands speed. We have the wire transfer ready, but he requires you to sign our specific purchase agreement, standard procedure for international acquisitions." I slid the document across the table. Marcus Reynolds picked it up. "We have our own contract." "Then the deal is off," I said, reaching for the papers. "My boss does not negotiate paperwork. Sign ours, or we walk, and you can call back the guy who offered 2 million. Pamela grabbed the contract from Marcus's hands. "Don't be an idiot. Marcus, sign it." "But Mrs. Starling, Marcus whispered, flipping through the pages. Clause 17. The penalty for title fraud is aggressive, 200%. So what? Pamela hissed, loud enough for me to hear. The title is fine. The notary fixed it this morning. Just sign it so we can get the money. She didn't care. She believed her own lie. She believed that because she had paid a bribe, reality had changed. She grabbed the pen, the same gold Mont Blanc she had tried to force me to use, and slashed her signature across the bottom of the page. There, she said, triumphantly, pushing the paper toward me. Signed, now. The wire transfer. I picked up the contract. I checked the signature. It was valid. It was legally binding. The trap was sprung. I tapped my earpiece again. Sir. Yes, she signed. Yes, the price is $4.5 million. I paused. I listened to the silence in my ear. What? I said, feigning shock. Are you sure I am looking at the seller right now? You have the report from the county clerk. I see. The room went quiet. Pamela's smile faltered. Is there a problem? I took the earpiece out and looked at her with cold, dead eyes. Mrs. Starling, I said, my employer's due diligence team just flagged a massive irregularity in the title history. That's impossible, Pamela squeaked. They have a sworn affidavit and video evidence that the quitclaim deed transferring the property from Leilani Starling to you was forged this morning at 9:30 a.m., I said, and that the signature of the co-owner was falsified. Pamela turned white as the snow outside. Jackson looked like he was going to vomit. That is a lie, she stammered. Who is your employer? That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that you just signed a contract guaranteeing clean title. You have breached Clause 17. So the deal is off, Jackson asked, his voice shaking. We just don't sell it. Oh, no, I smiled. The sale is canceled, but the contract remains in effect, specifically, the penalty clause. You knowingly attempted to sell a property with a fraudulent title. You now owe my firm 200% of the agreed sale price as a penalty for breach of contract and attempted fraud. I did the math for them. That is $9 million, I said. Payable immediately. You're insane, Pamela screamed. I don't have $9 million. You can't do this. We can, I said. And we will. We will place a lien on every asset you have. The foundation funds, your personal accounts, your cars, everything. I turned to leave. You will hear from our legal department within the hour. Wait, Jackson yelled, grabbing my arm. I shook him off with a glare that made him recoil. Please, we are ruined. There has to be another way. Right on cue. The double doors at the back of the room opened. Silas Thorne walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was wearing a trench coat and looking every bit the predatory lender. He wasn't representing me, not officially. He was representing the other interest. I couldn't help but overhear, Thorne said, his voice smooth as silk. It sounds like you folks are in a bit of a liquidity bind. Who are you? Pamela demanded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I represent Nemesis Holdings, Thorne said. We specialize in complex financial situations. We buy distressed debt. We solve problems. Can you solve $9 million? Jackson asked desperately. We can pay the penalty for you, Thorne said, shrugging. We will wire the $9 million to this lady's firm immediately to stop the lawsuit. But what? Pamela begged. Anything. In exchange, Nemesis Holdings takes a senior secured position on everything, Thorne said. We own the house. We own the rights to your charity's future income. We own your residuals. And we own a controlling interest in any future earnings of Mr. Jackson Starling here. It is a high-interest loan, 30% annually, but it keeps you out of jail for fraud. It was a deal with the devil. It was slavery. 30%, Marcus Reynolds choked. That is usury. The alternative, I said, stepping in, is that my firm files criminal charges for the forgery we have on tape. You go to federal prison for 20 years. Mrs. Starling, your choice." Pamela looked at me, the stranger, the enemy. Then she looked at Thorne, the savior who was actually the executioner. "Sign it, Mom," Jackson sobbed. "I can't go to jail. Please, just sign it." Pamela's hand shook violently. She looked at the house, the symbol of her status. She looked at the people watching. She realized she was cornered. She signed the paper Thorne held out. "Done," Thorne said. "We will handle the penalty payment." He looked at me and winked a tiny, imperceptible movement. I closed my portfolio. "Then my business here is concluded. Good luck, Mrs. Starling. I have a feeling you are going to need it." I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I didn't look back. I heard Pamela sobbing. I heard Jackson screaming at Marcus Reynolds. I walked through the lobby, out the front doors, and into the waiting black limousine. The driver held the door open. I slid into the back seat, the heated leather embracing me. The moment the door closed, I pulled off the blonde wig and threw it on the seat next to me. I took off the glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. I let out a long, slow breath. We owned them. Nemesis Holdings. My company now owned the debt on the house, Jackson's life, and Pamela's freedom. They owed me $9 million plus interest. They were living in my house, driving cars I effectively owned, and every dollar they made for the rest of their lives would funnel straight into my bank account. I looked out the tinted window as the limo pulled away from the curb. I saw Pamela and Jackson stumbling out of the hotel entrance, arguing in the sleet, looking smaller and more pathetic than I had ever seen them. The trap hadn't just sprung, it had crushed them. And the beautiful part was, they still didn't know whose hand was on the lever. The peace of my new life was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. Not by a lawyer or a bank notification, but by the shrill, hysterical screaming of my sister echoing through the marble lobby of my building. I was upstairs in the penthouse, sitting by the window with a cup of Earl Grey tea, watching the snow fall over the city. It had been 3 days since the auction. 3 days since I had wrapped a noose of debt around their necks. I knew they were panicking. Nemesis Holdings had already sent the first demand for payment on the interest, a sum they couldn't possibly afford without liquidating assets they no longer really owned. I expected them to crumble quietly. I underestimated their capacity for delusion. The intercom on my wall buzzed urgently. It was Henry, the daytime concierge, a man of infinite patience who was currently sounding very rattled. "Ms. Starling," Henry's voice crackled. "I am so sorry to disturb you, but there are individuals here. They claim to be your family. They are causing a significant disturbance. They bypassed the outer security door when a delivery driver exited. I have called the police, but they are refusing to leave." "I can hear them." "Henry," I said calmly, "don't worry, I'm coming down." I didn't dress for a fight. I dressed for a boardroom. I put on a pair of white wide-leg trousers and a cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal. I slid my feet into soft leather loafers. I checked my reflection. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like the woman who owned the building, which, through a complex series of shell companies, I effectively did. I took the elevator down. As the numbers counted down 40, 30, 20, the noise grew louder. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, I walked into a circus. Margot was there, phone held high, live streaming to her audience. She was wearing a coat that looked expensive, but was likely returned the next day. Jackson was pacing the lobby floor like a caged animal, his face flushed red, shouting at Henry, and there, standing in the center of the storm like the eye of a hurricane, was Pamela. She had brought backup. 2 uniformed police officers were standing by the door, looking uncomfortable but alert. "There she is," Margot shrieked, swinging her phone around to point the camera at me. "There is the squatter. Look at her. You guys, acting like she owns the place." Jackson lunged toward me, but Henry stepped in front of him. "Sir, step back." "That is my sister," Jackson yelled, spit flying from his mouth. "And she is a fraud. She is living here on stolen money." I stepped out of the elevator. My hands clasped loosely in front of me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The acoustics of the lobby carried my words perfectly. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Jackson, Margot. To what do I owe the pleasure of this intrusion?" Pamela stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Officer, that is her, Leilani Starling. Arrest her." The older police officer, a man with a tired face and a badge that read Sergeant Miller, stepped forward. "Ma'am, these people claim you are residing here illegally and that the funds used to secure this lease were embezzled from the Heart of Gold Charity Foundation." The lobby was filling up. Residents were stopping to watch. Delivery guys were lingering. Margot's phone was capturing every second, broadcasting my humiliation to thousands of people. "She is an escort," Margot shouted for the benefit of her viewers. "That is the only way she could afford this. She is selling herself and stealing from sick children. Tell them the truth. Leilani, tell them who is paying for this penthouse." "It is charity money," Pamela cried out, playing to the crowd. "We audited the books. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Missing." She had access to the accounts when she was living in my basement. She stole from orphans to play princess in a high-rise. It was a lie so bold, so desperate, that it almost commanded respect. They couldn't conceive of a world where I had money legitimately. So, in their minds, I must be a whore or a thief. They needed a narrative that made them the victims and me the villain. "Officer," I said, looking at Miller, "I have never had access to the Heart of Gold accounts. My mother knows this. This is harassment. We have proof," Jackson lied, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. It looked like a printed Excel spreadsheet that anyone could have typed up. "Look at the dates. The withdrawals match the dates she moved in here. She is a criminal." The crowd was murmuring. People love a scandal. I saw a neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, looking at me with suspicion. The accusation of theft is ugly. The accusation of prostitution is sticky. They were throwing mud, hoping it would harden into cement. "We need to clear this up," Officer Miller said, looking at me. "Ms. Starling, can you prove you are the leaseholder? Can you prove the source of funds for this residence? If there's a dispute about stolen funds, I might have to ask you to come down to the station until we sort it out." "I am not going to the station," I said coldly, "and I am not going to have this conversation in a lobby while my sister monetizes my privacy." I looked at Henry. "Open the management conference room, the one with the large presentation screen." I turned to the police officers. "You want proof? I will give you proof. Bring them." I walked toward the glass-walled conference room adjacent to the lobby. The police followed. Pamela, Jackson, and Margot scrambled after them, Margot narrating breathlessly into her phone. "She is cornered. Guys, we are about to expose everything. Stay tuned." We filed into the room. It was sleek, modern, dominated by a massive 80-inch screen on the far wall. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Pamela and her brood stood on the other side, looking triumphant. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was going to try to talk my way out of it. "Sit down," I ordered. "Don't tell me what to do," Jackson sneered. "Sit down," Officer Miller commanded. Jackson sat. I pulled my phone, the secure device Silas Thorne had given me, from my pocket. I plugged it into the HDMI cable resting on the table. The large screen flickered to life, mirroring my phone's display. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "You accused me of stealing from the Heart of Gold Foundation. You accused me of obtaining money through illicit means. You claimed I am destitute without your charity." "We know the truth," Pamela scoffed, crossing her arms. "Stop the theatrics, Leilani. Just admit you took the money so we can maybe work out a plea deal. I am your mother. I can ask the judge for leniency." I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I saw her not as the giant who controlled my life, but as a small, sad woman drowning in her own lies. "You are right, Mother," I said. "We should look at the truth." I tapped the icon for the Banque Privée Zurich app. The login screen appeared. Face ID scanned my features. The loading circle spun for a second. The room was silent. Margot was still filming. Holding the phone steady, then, the dashboard loaded. The numbers were white against a dark blue background. They were large. They were undeniable. Total balance: $57,432,108.42. The silence that followed was heavy, physical. It sucked the air out of the room. Jackson's mouth fell open. He blinked, rubbing his eyes as if the numbers would rearrange themselves. Margot lowered her phone slightly, her influencer persona cracking. Is that real?" she whispered. "Is that a screenshot?" "It is a live banking session," I said. I tapped the screen, scrolling down to the transaction history. "See today's date. Live market updates." Pamela was frozen. She was staring at the screen with the expression of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Her face had gone the color of ash. "Where?" she croaked. "Where did you get that? Who did you? Who did you sleep with? That is cartel money, officer. That is drug money." She couldn't accept it. Her brain was rejecting the reality. "Look at the source. Mother," I said, pointing to the transaction line item under the deposit. "Incoming wire royalties/IP acquisition. Starling Algorithms patent. Estate of Tobias Starling." Pamela read the words. I watched the comprehension hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. "Tobias," she whispered. "No, he was a failure. He was nothing. He was a genius," I said, my voice rising, filling the room with the anger I had suppressed for 20 years. "He invented the code that allows you to stream your terrible movies. Jackson, he built the backbone of the video platforms you use to spread your lies. Margot, and he left it all to me." I walked around the table, closing the distance between us. "You told me he was a drunk," I said to Pamela. "You told me he abandoned me. You kept his letters from me. You stole my father from me, but you couldn't steal his legacy." I didn't know," Pamela stammered, tears of shock leaking from her eyes. "Leilani, honey, I was trying to protect you. I didn't know there was money. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have stolen it," I cut her off. "Just like you stole the house. Just like you tried to steal my dignity." I turned to Margot, who was still live streaming, though her hand was shaking violently now. The comments on her screen were flying by so fast they were a blur. "OMG 57 million. She's rich LMAO. The mom's face. Margot, you are cooked." "Keep filming, Margot," I said. "This is the best content you will ever create, because I want everyone to see this next part." I turned back to the screen. "You accused me of stealing from charity," I said. "Let's talk about charity." I opened the transfer tab on the app. "You have been using the Heart of Gold Foundation as your personal piggy bank," I said, looking at Pamela. "You use it to buy dresses, to host parties, to pretend you are a saint. Well, I think it is time the city saw what real philanthropy looks like." I typed in a beneficiary name. Beneficiary, the Safe Haven Network. Pamela gasped. Safe Haven was her arch-rival. It was a shelter for victims of domestic abuse that actually did the work. No galas, no sequins, just beds and legal aid. Pamela hated them because they refused to let her sit on their board. I moved to the amount field. I typed a 5, then a 0, then another, and another. 6 zeros. Amount $5 million. "No!" Pamela screamed, lunging forward. "You can't. That is family money. That belongs to us. You can't give it to them." Officer Miller stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Stand back, ma'am." "Watch me," I said. I typed into the memo field, speaking the words as I wrote them. Memo donation in honor of Pamela Starling. For all the years she taught me what a victim looks like. I looked at my family one last time. Jackson was crying, actual tears of loss, watching $5 million more than he would ever earn evaporate. Margot looked terrified. realizing she had just accused a multimillionaire of theft on camera, and the lawsuit was going to be biblical. Pamela looked broken. "This is for Dad," I whispered. I pressed confirm. The screen loaded for a heartbeat. Then, a green checkmark appeared. Transfer successful. "There," I said, turning to the police officer. "Officer Miller, I believe I have proven that I have the means to pay my rent, and I believe I have proven that I do not need to steal from a bankrupt charity run by a woman who is currently under investigation for mortgage fraud." Officer Miller looked at the screen, then at me. He nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "You have, Ms. Starling. Apologies for the disturbance." He turned to Pamela. "Mrs. Starling, you need to leave, now, or I will arrest you for trespassing and filing a false police report." Pamela stared at the screen, where the balance had dropped to $52 million. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, searching for the daughter she could manipulate. The girl who craved a crumb of affection. She found only a wall of ice. "Get out," I said. Jackson grabbed his mother's arm. "Come on. Mom, we have to go. We have to go now." They retreated. It wasn't a march. It was a rout. Margot ended her stream abruptly, shoving her phone in her pocket. Jackson dragged Pamela, who was sobbing hysterically about her money, her legacy, her $5 million. When the door closed behind them, the room fell silent. I looked at the screen. $52 million. It was still more money than I could spend in a lifetime. But the number that mattered wasn't the bank balance. It was the $5 million I had just sent into the world. It was the first time in the history of the Starling name that our money was going to heal a wound instead of inflicting one. I unplugged my phone. The screen went black. I walked out of the conference room and back to the elevator. Henry was standing there, looking awestruck. "Ms. Starling," he said, straightening his tie. "Shall I call a car for you?" "No, Henry," I said, pressing the button for the penthouse. "I'm going upstairs to finish my tea. I think the snow is stopping." I rode the elevator up, alone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. For the first time since the night of the gala, the cold knot of fear in my stomach was gone. They knew, the world knew, and the ghost of Tobias Starling was finally, truly resting in peace. The silence in the conference room did not last long. It was broken by the sound of heavy leather shoes striking the floor, a rhythmic, authoritative cadence that signaled the end of the emotional theatrics and the beginning of the surgical extraction. Silas Thorne walked through the open glass doors. He was no longer playing the part of the friendly predatory lender who had offered them a lifeline at the auction. He was fully in his element now, a creature of statutes and subpoenas, followed closely by two men in cheap gray suits who carried thick stacks of paperwork like weapons of war. "Going somewhere?" Thorne asked, his voice pleasant but devoid of warmth. Pamela stopped, her hand gripping the doorframe. She looked from me to Thorne, her eyes darting with the panic of a trapped animal realizing the cage wasn't just locked, but shrinking. "We are leaving," Pamela hissed, trying to summon the remnants of her dignity. "My daughter has made her point. We are done here." "I am afraid you are not done, Mrs. Starling," Thorne said, stepping into her path. "In fact, you are just getting started. Leilani has concluded her personal business. I am here to commence the legal business." Thorne signaled to the men in gray suits. They stepped forward, moving with the mechanical efficiency of process servers who had done this 1,000 times. "Pamela Starling," the first man asked, thrusting a thick envelope into her chest. She instinctively grabbed it. "You have been served." He turned to Jackson. "Jackson Starling served." He turned to Margot. "Margot Starling served." "What is this?" Jackson demanded, staring at the thick packet in his hands. "You can't sue us. We are family." "It is not a single lawsuit, Mr. Starling," Thorne corrected, adjusting his glasses. "It is a barrage. Let me walk you through the highlights, just so everyone is on the same page." Thorne pointed a long, manicured finger at the document in Pamela's hands. "Mrs. Starling, You are holding a civil complaint for fraud, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty, specifically regarding the forgery of the quitclaim deed transferring Leilani's property rights to yourself. We have also included account for the embezzlement of the custodial trust fund established by Tobias Starling in 1999. We have forensic accounting tracing the withdrawal of those funds to your personal accounts over the last decade. That is grand larceny. Mrs. Starling, we are seeking treble damages. Pamela's face went gray. That was for her upbringing. I used that money to feed her. The receipts show you used it to purchase a timeshare in Cabo and a fleet of leased Mercedes, Thorne countered smoothly. The court will decide the definition of upbringing. He turned to Jackson, who was trembling. Jackson, your packet contains a suit for identity theft and credit fraud. We have identified 7 student loans and 3 lines of credit opened using Leilani's social security number. The IP addresses trace back to your personal laptop. The funds were deposited into an account solely under your control. That is federal wire fraud. We are also filing a formal complaint with the FBI this afternoon. I didn't, Jackson stammered, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. Leilani, tell him you said I could. You said you would help me. I said nothing. I just watched him unravel. And Margot, Thorne said. Turning to my sister, she was holding the papers like they were contaminated. Defamation per se, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violations of the Illinois Cyberstalking Act. We have the logs of the bot farms you hired. We have the metadata proving you fabricated the evidence of the theft. You accused a private citizen of a felony to an audience of millions for financial gain. That is libel, and it is expensive. This is ridiculous, Pamela spat, regaining a shred of her composure. You are bluffing. We will get our own lawyers. We will countersue for harassment. You are welcome to try, Thorne said. But lawyers cost money, and that brings me to my second capacity here today. Thorne opened his briefcase and pulled out a single, crisp sheet of paper. As the authorized representative of Nemesis Holdings, Thorne announced, his voice dropping an octave, becoming harder. I am hereby notifying you that you are in default of the loan agreement signed 3 days ago. Default! Jackson shrieked. We just signed it. The first payment isn't due for 30 days. Clause 4, Section B, Thorne cited from memory. The lender reserves the right to accelerate the debt and demand immediate repayment in full if the borrower is involved in any legal proceeding that materially affects their ability to repay. Given that you have just been served with lawsuits totaling approximately $12 million in damages, Nemesis Holdings considers its collateral at extreme risk. He smiled. A shark smelling blood. We are calling the loan, the entire principal of $9 million, plus the accrued interest and penalties, is due immediately, as in, right now. We don't have $9 million, Pamela screamed. You know we don't. We know, Thorne said, which is why we have already moved to the next step. Asset seizure. He checked his watch. At this exact moment, a writ of attachment has been served to your banks. Your personal checking accounts, the Heart of Gold operating accounts, and your investment portfolios have been frozen pending the resolution of this debt. Pamela scrambled for her phone. She opened her banking app. I watched her frantic tapping. It's red, she whispered, looking up with horror. It says, account locked, legal hold. I can't access anything. My cards. Are they frozen too? Everything, Thorne confirmed. You cannot buy a pack of gum, Mrs. Starling, not until Nemesis Holdings is satisfied. This is illegal, Jackson shouted, stepping toward Thorne. You can't just take everything. Officer Miller, who had been watching the exchange with professional interest, stepped forward, his hand resting near his belt. Step back, son. And speaking of assets, Thorne said, looking out the glass walls of the lobby toward the street. Jackson, did you drive the Porsche Cayenne here today? The black one with the custom plates? Yeah, Jackson said, distracted. Why? Because that vehicle is listed as collateral on the business loan you defaulted on, Thorne said. The one Nemesis Holdings bought from the bank. We all looked out the window. Through the glass. We could see a large flatbed tow truck backing up to the curb where Jackson's pride and joy was parked. A man in a neon vest was already hooking chains to the axle. "No!" Jackson roared. He turned and sprinted out of the conference room, running through the lobby. "Hey, stop that, is my car. Stop." We followed him out. A grim procession. I walked calmly beside Thorne. Pamela and Margot ran ahead, their heels clicking frantically on the marble. By the time we reached the sidewalk, the Porsche was already tilted at a 45-degree angle, being dragged onto the flatbed. The alarm was blaring, a rhythmic wailing that matched Jackson's screaming. "You can't take it!" Jackson was yelling at the driver, grabbing the man's arm. "My lawyer is coming. Put it down." The driver, a burly man who looked like he ate rocks for breakfast, shook Jackson off like a fly. "Paperwork is valid. Pal, talk to the bank, or in this case, the holding company." "Leilani." Jackson spun around, his face wet with tears and snot. "Stop them. Tell them to stop. It's my car. It's the only thing I have." "It isn't yours." "Jackson," I said, standing under the awning to shield myself from the wind. "It belongs to the bank. And now, the bank belongs to me." While Jackson wept over his car, Margot's phone began to ping. Not the steady stream of likes she was used to, but a discordant, rapid-fire series of notifications. "What is happening?" Margot muttered, looking at her screen. Her face went pale. "No, no, no, no." "What?" Pamela snapped, watching the tow truck drive away with her son's car. "My agency," Margot whispered. "They just dropped me. Breach of morality clause." She tapped the screen. "And Sephora. They just canceled the partnership. They said they can't be associated with a criminal investigation. Who told them? How do they know already?" "I imagine the press release Nemesis Holdings sent out 10 minutes ago helped," Thorne noted dryly. "Transparency is key in the corporate world. Margot?" "You ruined me!" Margot shrieked, throwing her phone into her purse. "My career is over. Do you know how hard I worked for those followers?" "About as hard as you worked to frame me," I said. Pamela had recovered from the shock of the frozen accounts and was now pivoting to her last line of defense, the victim card. She saw Officer Miller standing by the door. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her coat, and walked over to him, tears welling up in her eyes on command. "Officer," she sobbed softly, "you have to help us. This is a setup. My daughter, she is mentally unstable. She forged that signature on the deed herself to frame me. I never signed anything. I am an honest woman. I run a charity. Please, you can't let them take our home based on a lie." It was a good performance, almost convincing. Officer Miller looked at her, his expression softening slightly. Doubt is a powerful weapon, and Pamela wielded it like a master. "If there is a dispute about the signature," Miller said, looking at Thorne, "this might be a civil matter that needs to be paused until a forensic analysis is done. We can't enforce a contract if the validity is in question." Thorne looked at me. I nodded. "Actually, officer," I said, pulling my phone out again. "We anticipated that Mrs. Starling might have a lapse in memory regarding the transaction." I opened the audio file from the van surveillance. The file labeled evidence_forgery_001. "This was recorded 3 days ago," I said, holding the phone up. "In the study of the house at Highland Park Drive." I pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. Notary's voice. "The registry shows the transfer is pending. I am backdating the stamp to 3 years ago. Mrs. Starling, as far as anyone can tell. Leilani signed this quitclaim deed before she became unstable." Pamela's voice. "Good. Here is $5,000. Cash. You were never here." Notary's voice. "Pleasure doing business with you." I pressed pause. The color drained from Pamela's face so completely she looked like a corpse. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Officer Miller's expression hardened instantly. The sympathy evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard look of a lawman who realized he was being played. "That sounds a lot like a confession to a felony. Mrs. Starling," Miller said, his hand moving to his radio. It is a deep fake, Pamela shrieked, her voice cracking. With AI, she made it with AI. We have the video too, Thorne interjected, and the serial numbers of the bills you used to pay the bribe. Would you like to see those? Pamela shrank back. Officer Miller stepped forward. Mrs. Starling. Mr. Starling. Mrs. Starling. While I am not arresting you at this exact moment because the Economic Crimes Division needs to process the warrants, I am serving you with this. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. This is a restraining order and a notice of investigation. You are considered flight risks. Your passports have been flagged. Do not attempt to leave the state of Illinois. Do not attempt to contact Leilani Starling. Do not go near the assets listed in the Nemesis Holdings lawsuit. But how do we get home? Margot whined, looking at the slushy street. Jackson's car is gone. Mom's cards are frozen. We can't call an Uber. That, I said, sounds like a problem for people who aren't burdened by $57 million. I gestured to the street. It is a 5-mile walk to Highland Park. I suggest you start moving. The temperature is dropping. You are making us walk, Pamela gasped. In this weather, I am your mother. And I was your daughter when you threw me out in a snowstorm with no coat, I reminded her. At least you have coats. You are already doing better than I was. I turned my back on them. Henry, please ensure they leave the property. If they linger, have them arrested for trespassing. With pleasure, Ms. Starling, Henry said. Stepping forward, I watched from the warmth of the lobby as my family, the pillars of society, the philanthropists, the influencers huddled together on the sidewalk. Jackson was still crying about his car. Margot was trying to hide her face from passers-by. Pamela looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Passers-by were stopping, not to help, but to look. Some of them had their phones out. I saw a group of teenagers pointing at Margot. Hey, isn't that the girl who lied about her sister? One of them shouted. Live stream this. Margot pulled her hood up, shrinking away. The internet she had weaponized against me had turned on her, hungry for the new villain. They began to walk, heads down, shoulders hunched, trudging through the gray sludge of the Chicago streets. No limo was coming. No bailout was coming. Legal tsunami confirmed, Thorne said quietly. Standing beside me, impact successful. It is not over, I said, watching them disappear around the corner. They still have the house, for now. Not for long, Thorne promised. The foreclosure notice goes out tomorrow. I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby smelled of fresh lilies and expensive floor polish. It smelled like justice. Come on, Silas, I said, turning toward the elevator. I have a business to run, and I think I need to buy a car, maybe a Porsche. The conference room at the mediation center smelled of stale carpet and despair. It was a stark contrast to the high-rise luxury of the Four Seasons or the pristine marble of my lobby. This was a place where dreams went to die in stacks of paperwork, a neutral ground for people who could no longer stand to be in the same zip code. I sat on the left side of the long laminate table, flanked by Silas Thorne and 2 junior associates from his firm. We were dressed in sharp, tailored suits, armed with binders of evidence that were indexed, tabbed, and terrifyingly organized. On the other side sat the remnants of the Starling dynasty. It had only been 7 days since the confrontation in the lobby, but time had been cruel to them. Without the access to high-end salons, dermatologists, and the endless stream of cash from the credit lines I had frozen, the illusion had crumbled. Pamela looked 10 years older. Her roots were showing a harsh gray stripe against the dyed blonde. She wore a coat that I recognized from 3 seasons ago, and her hands, usually manicured to perfection, were twisting a tissue into shreds. Jackson sat slumped in his chair, wearing a hoodie that looked like he had slept in it. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room with the paranoid energy of an addict going through withdrawal, except his drug was status. And I had cut off the supply. Margot was the most jarring. Without her ring light and filters, She looked like a frightened child. She wasn't holding a phone. For the first time in her life, she was experiencing a moment without an audience, and it clearly terrified her. Next to them sat their lawyer, a man named Mr. Gable. He was a court-appointed public defender type they had hired with whatever cash they had scraped together. He looked exhausted before we had even begun, eyeing Thorne's team with the resignation of a man bringing a plastic knife to a drone strike. "We are here to discuss a settlement," Mr. Gable began, his voice wavering slightly. "My clients they are willing to admit that mistakes were made. But the damages you are seeking, $12 million. Seizure of all assets. It is punitive. It is excessive." "It is accurate," Thorne replied, not even looking up from his file. "We have calculated the stolen trust funds, the compound interest over 20 years, the penalties for the fraudulent house sale, and the identity theft debts. If anything, $12 million is a discount." Pamela let out a sob. It wasn't the practiced, elegant cry she used at galas. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Leilani," she pleaded, ignoring the lawyers. "Look at me. Look at your mother." I turned my head slowly. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a hollow recognition, like looking at a stranger in an old photograph. "I am looking, Pamela," I said. "How can you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I gave you life. I raised you. Yes, I was tough on you. Yes, I made mistakes. But I did it to make you strong, and the money from your father. I didn't spend it on myself. I saved it. I invested it in the house, in the family image, so you would have a legacy to inherit. You spent it on a Porsche for Jackson and a nose job for Margot," I said calmly. "And you tried to sell the legacy to a stranger for cash 4 days ago. Don't rewrite history just because you got caught holding the pen." "But we are blood," she cried, slamming her hand on the table. "Doesn't that mean anything to you? We are your people if you destroy us. You are destroying a part of yourself. You will be alone, Leilani, rich, yes, but all alone in that cold tower." It was her final card, the fear of abandonment. She had planted that seed when I was 5 years old, telling me my father left because I wasn't enough. She had watered it every day since. "I would rather be alone in a tower," I said, "than crowded in a sewer with rats." Jackson flinched as if I had hit him. "We want to offer a compromise," Mr. Gable interjected, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Starling is willing to acknowledge the debt. She proposes a payment plan, $500 a month, and in exchange, you drop the lawsuits and the restraining orders. It is a gesture of good faith." Thorne laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. $500 a month, Mr. Gable, at that rate. The debt will be paid off in roughly 2,000 years. We are not here for payment plans. We are here for surrender. "Then we go to trial," Jackson shouted. Sitting up, "We will get a jury. We will tell them you tricked us. You entrapped us with that fake auction. No jury will convict a mother for trying to save her house." "A jury might be sympathetic to a mother," I agreed. "But they tend to be less sympathetic to a woman who violates a poison pill clause." The room went quiet. Even Thorne looked at me. This was the moment. I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. It was the one document Thorne had held back until today. "What is that?" Pamela whispered. "A letter," I said. "From Tobias. He wrote it the week you divorced him. He gave it to his firm with strict instructions. It was only to be opened if legal action was taken against his estate regarding concealment of assets." I slid the letter across the table. "Read it," I commanded. Pamela picked it up with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the faded ink. I saw her breath hitch. I saw her pupils dilate. "Read it out loud," I said. I can't," she choked out. "Read it." I slammed my hand on the table, the sudden noise making Margot jump. Pamela swallowed hard. Her voice was barely a whisper. Tobias Starling, being of sound mind, know exactly who I was married to. Pamela does not play by rules. She plays by leverage. Therefore, I am including a specific penalty clause in the architecture of the Starling Trust. If the executor or guardian Pamela is found to have intentionally concealed the existence of this trust from the beneficiary Leilani for a period exceeding 5 years, a forfeiture condition is triggered. She stopped, looking up at me with horror. Keep reading, I said. Triggered, she continued, her voice breaking. In such an event, any assets personally held by the concealing party shall be considered immediately liable for liquidated damages to compensate the beneficiary for emotional distress and loss of opportunity. The penalty shall be 100% of the concealing party's net worth, independent of the stolen funds. I leaned back. He knew you. Pamela, he knew you would hide the money. He knew you would try to keep me poor, to keep me under your thumb. So he turned the will into a landmine. You didn't just steal my inheritance by hiding it for 20 years. You legally agreed to give me everything you own. This won't hold up, Mr. Gable stammered, but he looked pale. He knew contract law. He knew that specific performance clauses in trusts were incredibly difficult to break, especially when fraud was involved. It will hold up, Thorne said. And combined with the forgery video, the wire fraud, and the embezzlement, Mrs. Starling, if we go to trial, you aren't just losing your money, you are going to federal prison. The guidelines for this amount of fraud suggest a sentence of 10 to 15 years. I looked at Jackson. And you, Jackson, identity theft, credit fraud, 5 to 8 years. I looked at Margot. Cyberstalking, defamation, you might get probation. But you will have a felony record. Good luck getting a brand deal with a mugshot. The reality settled over them like a shroud. 10 years, 15 years, prison, real prison, not the white-collar resort camps they saw on TV, but federal facilities with steel bars and concrete floors. So here is the offer, I said, sliding a new document across the table. The unconditional surrender. Mr. Gable grabbed it and read it quickly. This strips them of everything, he whispered. Option A, I said, holding up one finger. We walk out of here. I file the criminal complaints with the FBI this afternoon. You are arrested by dinner time. The trial takes a year. You lose. You go to prison. I get everything anyway through civil judgments. Option B, I held up a second finger. You sign this. You admit to the fraud. You agree to liquidate all remaining assets, the house, the furniture, the jewelry, everything to pay Nemesis Holdings. You declare bankruptcy. You issue a public video apology, scripted by me, admitting you lied about the theft and the charity, and I paused. And you agree to a permanent restraining order. You will never contact me again. You will never come within 500 meters of me, my home, or my business. You disappear from my life. Completely. You want to leave us on the street? Jackson yelled, his face turning purple. We won't have anywhere to live. You can get jobs, I said simply. I hear the Ritz-Carlton is hiring servers, though you might need to work on your attitude. You bitch. It happened fast, Jackson snapped. The pressure, the fear, the humiliation it boiled over. He launched himself across the table, his hands reaching for my throat. I'll kill you, he screamed. You ruined everything. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. Thorne didn't move either, but the man standing quietly in the corner, my new head of security, a former Navy SEAL named Davies, moved. In a blur of motion, Davies intercepted Jackson in midair. There was a sickening thud as Jackson was slammed onto the laminate table, followed by the sharp crack of his arm being twisted behind his back. Ah! Jackson howled, his face pressed against the table, right next to the poison pill letter. Stay down, Davies said, his voice calm and terrifying. Margot screamed. Pamela stood up, her hands covering her mouth. Jackson, she cried. I looked down at my brother, pinned to the table like a butterfly. That, I said, is assault. That is another 5 years. Jackson, unless you sign. I looked at Pamela. Sign the paper. Mother, or I let him take Jackson to the police station right now." Pamela looked at her son, writhing in pain. She looked at me, and in that moment, the mask fell away completely. There was no more "I love you," no more family. There was only pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked at me with eyes that wanted me dead. She hated me not because I was bad, but because I had won. She hated me because I was the mirror showing her exactly how small she was. "I should have flushed you," she hissed, her voice venomous. "I should have gotten rid of you when you were born." "But you didn't," I said. "And that was your mistake. Sign." She grabbed the pen. She stabbed the paper with the nib, tearing through the page as she signed her name. Pamela Starling. She threw the pen at me. It bounced off my chest and clattered to the floor. "Jackson," she choked out. "Sign it." Davies released the pressure on Jackson's arm just enough for him to move his hand. Jackson, sobbing with pain and rage, scrawled his signature. Margot didn't need to be told. She was already signing, desperate to avoid prison, desperate to just get out of this room. Thorne picked up the document. He checked the signatures. He checked the notary stamp from the mediator. "It is finished," Thorne said. He signaled Davies, who hauled Jackson up and shoved him back into his chair. Jackson cradled his arm, glaring at me with the eyes of a wounded coyote. "The house needs to be vacated in 48 hours, Thorne stated, packing up his briefcase. "The auctioneers will come in on Monday to tag the contents. You may take clothing and personal toiletries, nothing of value. No jewelry, no electronics. If anything is missing, the deal is void, and the FBI gets the call." I stood up. I smoothed my suit. I picked up the letter from my father and placed it carefully back in my bag. "Leilani," Pamela said. Her voice was low, shaking with rage. "You think you won. You have no one. You are an orphan now. You are dead to us." I looked at them one last time. The mother who saw me as an ATM. The brother who saw me as a punching bag. The sister who saw me as content. "I have been an orphan for 20 years. Pamela," I said. "Today is just the paperwork catching up." I turned and walked toward the door. "And by the way," I added, pausing with my hand on the handle, "the apology video needs to be posted by 6 o'clock tonight. Don't use a filter. Margot, people appreciate authenticity." I walked out. I didn't look back, but I could hear them. "You idiot," Pamela was screaming at Jackson. "You tried to attack her. You almost sent us to jail right there." "Me. You signed the fraud deed," Jackson shouted back. "This is your fault. You and your stupid greed." "Stop it." Margot was wailing. "Where are we going to sleep, Mom? Do something." "Shut up," Pamela shrieked. "Both of you. Just shut up." Their voices faded as I walked down the long corridor. They were eating each other alive. The toxicity that they had directed at me for decades had nowhere else to go. So it was turning inward. They would spend the rest of their miserable lives blaming each other for the ruin they had brought upon themselves. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the mediation center and stepped out. The storm had passed. The sky over Chicago was a brilliant, piercing blue. The air was cold and clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of freedom. My car was waiting at the curb, not a Porsche, but a sleek, understated sedan with Davies already opening the door. "Where to, Ms. Starling?" Davies asked. "Home," I said. "And then, the airport. I think I finally have time to go see Switzerland." I got in. As the car pulled away, I didn't check my rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth looking at. The Chicago summer has a way of erasing the memory of winter. The wind coming off Lake Michigan is no longer a knife made of ice. It is a gentle, humid breeze that smells of water and warm pavement. 6 months have passed since the night I walked out of the mediation room, leaving my family in the ruins of their own making. 6 months since the snowstorm, where I almost froze to death in an alley behind the Ritz-Carlton. I stood on the wooden deck of my new home, holding a mug of coffee. It was not a penthouse in the sky. It was not a sprawling Victorian mansion filled with ghosts and malice. It was a renovated mid-century modern house in Evanston, tucked away on a quiet street, lined with old oak trees, with a backyard that sloped gently down toward the water. It was modest by the standards of my bank account, but it was extravagant in the only currency that mattered to me now: peace. I sat down on a wicker chair and opened my laptop. The notification was waiting for me. Sale finalized, 1424 Highland Park Drive, the house, the fortress where Pamela had ruled, where Jackson had bullied me, where Margot had filmed her lies, was gone. Nemesis Holdings had foreclosed on it 3 months ago. We didn't keep it. I didn't want it. The walls had absorbed too much toxicity. We put it on the market, stripped of the furniture and the pretension, and it sold yesterday to a young family from Ohio who knew nothing of the Starling drama. The net proceeds from the sale, after paying off the mortgages Pamela had taken out, came to just over $1.2 million. I didn't keep a cent of it. I clicked open a new tab and logged into the dashboard for the Tobias Starling Future Architects Fund. I authorized the transfer of the entire $1.2 million into the endowment. Starting next semester, 6 students from underprivileged backgrounds, kids who were told they were too poor, too weird, or too burdening to pursue careers in technology, would go to college on full scholarships. My father never got to see his name in lights, but now, his name would be the reason a new generation of dreamers could fly. I closed the laptop. The final tie was cut. I often wondered if I would feel guilty. People tell you that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, but I learned that sometimes, blood is just another liquid that can drown you if you aren't careful. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I knew where they were. Silas Thorne kept tabs on them, sending me a monthly report that I read with a detached curiosity, like reading the obituary of a stranger. Pamela was living in a studio apartment in a rundown complex near O'Hare Airport. The irony was almost poetic. She spent her days surrounded by the sound of planes taking off, going to places she could no longer afford to visit. She had found a job at a call center, doing outbound telemarketing for a home security company. The woman who used to command gala ballrooms was now the annoying voice interrupting people's dinners, reading from a script, desperate for a commission. Thorne told me she had tried to join a local church choir to regain some social standing, but the gossip about the fraud had followed her. She sat in the back pew, alone, and left before the coffee hour. Jackson was learning the value of manual labor. With his credit destroyed and a criminal record for identity theft, pleaded down to a misdemeanor in exchange for total asset surrender, he couldn't get a loan for a sandwich, let alone a startup. He was working for a general contractor in the suburbs, hauling drywall and mixing cement. Nemesis Holdings garnished 30% of his wages every 2 weeks to pay down the interest on his debt. It would take him the rest of his life to pay it off. He wasn't driving a Porsche anymore. He was taking the bus, and Margot, my sister, the star. After the scandal broke, after the brands dropped her and the internet turned her into a meme for entitlement, she vanished. She deleted her accounts. She changed her number. The last report from Thorne's investigator placed her in Omaha, Nebraska. She was working as a cashier at a chain grocery store, wearing a name tag that said Maggie. She wore no makeup. She didn't look at her phone. She just scanned items, beep after beep, living the anonymous life she had once thought was a fate worse than death. They were alive. They were healthy. They were just ordinary. And for people who believed they were gods, being ordinary was the ultimate punishment. I put my coffee down and walked inside. My home office was bright and airy, with a wall of books and a dual monitor setup where I ran my business. I hadn't retired. I didn't want to spend the next 50 years drinking mimosas and shopping. I started a boutique data consultancy firm. We helped nonprofits optimize their donor outreach using the same algorithms my father had pioneered. I had 5 employees. I paid them double the industry standard. I treated them with respect. I checked the time. 6 o'clock. I had a dinner reservation. I showered and dressed. I didn't wear a power suit or a disguise. I wore a simple silk dress in a deep navy blue and a pair of comfortable heels. I pulled my hair back. I looked in the mirror and saw Leilani, not the victim, not the avenger, just Leilani. I called an Uber. I could have bought a fleet of limousines, but I liked the simplicity of an Uber. I liked being a passenger in my own city. The car dropped me off downtown, right in front of the Ritz-Carlton. I hadn't been back since that night. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the awning where the security guards had dragged me out. The snow was gone. The humiliation was gone. I walked toward the revolving doors. The doorman. A new guy smiled and spun the door for me. I stepped into the lobby. The smell hit me first, lilies and old money. It used to make me feel small. Now, it just smelled like a hotel. I walked across the marble floor, the same floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees while Margot filmed me. "Good evening, madam." I stopped. It was him, the floor manager, the small, nervous man who had handed me the rag and ordered me to clean up Jackson's mess. He was standing by the concierge desk, looking over a guest list. He looked up. He saw me. His eyes widened. He recognized me. He didn't see the waitress anymore. He saw the woman who had been on the cover of Crane's Chicago Business last month as a tech heiress to watch. He saw the dress. He saw the posture. He turned pale, then immediately plastered a sycophantic smile on his face. He rushed forward, bowing slightly. "Ms. Starling," he gushed, his voice dripping with oil. "What an honor. Welcome back to the Ritz-Carlton. Are you joining us for dinner? Can I arrange a private table? Perhaps a glass of our finest champagne on the house." He was terrified. He thought I was going to demand he be fired. He thought I was going to make a scene. I looked at him. I looked at the spot on the floor where I had knelt. "No, thank you," I said gently. "I am just passing through." Of course, he stammered, wringing his hands. "If there is anything you need, anything at all." "I have everything I need," I said. I walked past him. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't even stop walking. He wasn't worth the energy of a confrontation. He was just a ghost in a uniform, a relic of a life I had outgrown. I walked through the lobby and into the restaurant at the back. A table in the corner was already full. Sarah was there, my friend from college who had let me sleep on her couch when Pamela kicked me out the first time. David was there, the barista who used to give me free coffee when I was broke. And Silas Thorne was there, looking less like a shark and more like a proud uncle, holding a glass of wine. They saw me and waved. "There she is," Sarah cheered. "The woman of the hour." I sat down. There was no tension, no performance. We ordered burgers and fries. We drank wine that didn't cost a mortgage payment. We laughed about Sarah's bad dates and David's attempts to learn guitar. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering if I belonged at the table. I wasn't worried about who was paying the bill. I wasn't waiting for the insult. I looked around the table at their faces. These were my people, not by blood, but by choice. They had loved me when I had nothing. They loved me now that I had everything. "To Tobias," Thorne said, raising his glass. "To Tobias," we chorused. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like summer. Later that night, after the dinner, after the hugs, I returned to my quiet house by the lake. I kicked off my shoes and walked into the living room. I lit a fire in the fireplace, not because it was cold, but because I liked the light. I sat on the rug, pulling a small box toward me. It was the only thing I had kept from the old house, retrieved by Thorne before the sale. Inside were a few photos of my father and an old, tattered savings passbook. It was from a junior savings account Pamela had opened for me when I was 8, back before she completely turned on me. I remembered finding it in her desk drawer years ago. She had used it to hide some cash from the IRS. I opened it to the first page. There, in Pamela's sharp, angry handwriting, she had written a note in the memo line of a withdrawal. "Expense the burden." She had labeled me. She had written it down in ink, defining my existence as a cost, a weight, a problem to be managed. I picked up a black marker. I looked at the word. Burden. It used to make me cry. It used to make me feel like I should apologize for existing. I drew a thick, heavy line through it. 1 strike, 2 strikes, The word disappeared under the black ink. Next to it, in my own handwriting, steady, looped, and strong, I wrote 2 new words: worthy heir. I stared at it for a long time, then I closed the book and tossed it into the fire. I watched the pages curl and blacken. I watched the word burden turn to ash and float up the chimney, disappearing into the night sky to join the stars. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was probably an email from a client, or maybe a text from Sarah. I reached for it, but then I stopped. I didn't need to check it. I didn't need the validation. I didn't need to know what was happening in the world. I pressed the power button and held it down. The screen went black. The house was silent. Outside, the crickets were singing in the dark. The lake lapped gently against the shore. I closed my eyes and breathed in the silence. It was expensive. It was rare. It was mine. My mother said I was just an extra mouth to feed. She was wrong. I was the one who finally learned how to feed myself. And for the first time in 29 years, I was full. Thank you so much for listening to Leilani's story. I hope her journey from the frozen alley to the warm lake house reminded you that your value is never defined by how others treat you, even if those people are your family. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Chicago, or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Leilani's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Healing Drama Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can bring more stories of justice and resilience to people who need to hear them. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.